I'm short legs. Dr. Kara.
Oh, there we go. Our best Nicolas Cage impression to open the show. Patrick, it is finally time to talk about one of the most talked about, most highly anticipated movies of 2024. And I don't even think it's the most anticipated horror films, just films in general.
Yeah.
Longlegs.
Oh, welcome everyone to the finally long-awaited podcast for Longlegs, released, of course, in July of 2024, starring Micah Monroe as Agent Lee Harker, Nicolas Cage as Longlegs, Blair Underwood, the ageless Blair Underwood as Agent Carter, and Alicia Witt as Ruth Harker. Of course, as you mentioned, Damon, written and directed by Oz Perkins. I think, Damon, for me anyways, this is the most anticipated movie of the entire year, because not because I'm not completely obsessed with Alien Romulus, but because you know, and hardcore fans of this show know, that I have been ducking, dodging, and diving any and all Longlegs content up to this point. I saw one trailer and I'm pissed I did. Otherwise, I didn't know anything about this movie. And I can finally, the embargo has been lifted, and I've gazed upon Longlegs, and I've seen it in all of its glory, Damon, for good and for bad. But here we are again, 2 weeks in a row, two major, highly, highly anticipated horror films. But Longlegs, by the way, early word is this is going to be Neon's either first or second highest opening box office ever. It's already big. And I mean, Damon, you've been watching all the stuff. How are you're I don't think this is as crazy for you as it is for me.
It is on a different level, because while I did avoid everything past the first trailer, which I did watch the first trailer, and I think I may have seen the second trailer by accident when I went and saw another movie recently, where I know you ducked your head and basically avoided watching. You had to listen to it, but you didn't watch it. Where I got into Longlegs was where they started this marketing campaign like 6 months ago or 5 months ago, where we started seeing these weird little teasers of 911 calls and these weird images. And we just saw Longlegs coming soon. And we learned it was Nicolas Cage, it was Micah Monroe, and it was Osgood Perkins. And at that point, when the marketing for this movie first started, that was it. We literally had no idea what this was about. And I remember talking to you off air saying, I loved this marketing campaign because it told me everything I needed to know. It looks weird, and it's got Micah Monroe, which, I'd watch her, mow her yard. Nicolas Cage, who is incredible, and Osgood Perkins, who I have a pretty good history with of the movies of his I've seen. So I was in. I was in before I even knew what this was about. And when I saw the first trailer, it was still pretty obscure. You kind of get a better idea of what it was about, but the marketing drew me in right away, because you and I have talked about this many times. I know you hate all trailers. I actually like a good trailer, as long as you're not doing a Marvel thing where you're basically showing me the entire freaking movie in the trailers. Now, to be fair, Marvel's not exactly reinventing the wheel when you're seeing a Marvel movie, so I don't get as angry about those, because I've read comic books my entire life. I'm not, there's only so many ways you can spoil a Marvel movie for me anyways. But those Marvel trailers and DC trailers, it's like, man, they just show you the whole freaking movie in 3 trailers. By the time you get to the final trailer, you're like, well, I've seen this movie. I like horror trailers to tease me. I like them to titillate me, so to speak. And I don't want them to give me too much. Give me enough to get me excited. Give me enough to at least kind of understand who's in the movie, a general sense of the genre of horror. That's all I want to know. We talked at length a few months ago about Abigail, which we've said that the trailers ruined that movie. Because if they had not done the trailers the way they did, and we went into that movie cold, not knowing what it was actually about, I'm not saying it would have been top 5 at the end of the year, but the twist would have at least been like, oh, cool, that's a nice something we didn't see coming at the time. You gave it away in the first 30 seconds of the trailer and you ruined it. That was the whole twist of the movie. Longlegs didn't do that. Even though I still got a little bit more information than I wanted, I didn't know that much. So I was super excited going into this, but after Maxine last week, I tempered expectations because that one had me, I was jacked out of my mind. I felt like I was doing coke back in the 80s going into that movie. I was so like jacked up, jazzed up seeing it. And again, I didn't hate it by any means. My rave review was it's fine, as we all said. That was my 4-star letterbox review. It's fine. But I admit I went in way too jazzed up, excited to see it. This one I had to temper my expectations, and yeah, but I was right there with you. I was super excited for this movie.
Well, you know what I did right before this podcast? I sat down and I watched every piece of Longlegs, like trailer, teaser. I searched as far back as 6 months ago when they must have first started releasing stuff, and I watched everything. Finally, I finally released myself from the edict, from the embargo, and I would have gotten way too much out of those trailers. I really would have. I mean, I could see on their face too that I was like, oh, okay, these, like, you can't really grasp the story. You know it's an FBI agent going after a serial killer, and the serial killer seems very creepy. You get that much. But it certainly wasn't giving you anything plot wise. But once you're in the movie and you're seeing some of the very like avant-garde, strange, odd images that you end up seeing in these teaser trailers and these really strange trailers, like they are there's elements in those trailers that are definitely part of the story. So I would have been like, ah, shit, I did see that in the trailer. That has something to do with what's going on. I would have never been prepared for what actually was going on. And we'll get to, obviously we're going to get to that in spoilers. But I was like, yeah, I'm still glad I came into this as cold as I possibly could. That's still, in fact, I remember when I was done watching the movie going, I really just need to stop watching trailers, period. I just do. I would have loved this movie even more. I'm not saying that like it's my favorite movie of the year yet. I have no idea. I'm just saying like I love a good surprise. And now more than ever, like Longlegs has solidified for me that it's good that I go in cold. So it's too late for Alien Romulus. I know everything I need to know about Alien Romulus back and forth. I could probably tell the whole thing to Fede Alvarez if I needed to. Some things you're just not going to be able to avoid, but like I'll give them credit. It's a really, really creepy campaign. And it still doesn't spoil the movie for you. So kudos to them. Like hats off to them now that I've finally gotten to actually watch everything. It doesn't spoil the movie, but there are lots of elements that actually matter in the movie. So it's a real smart campaign because it's basically giving you clues. You don't know how to use those clues yet. Then the movie's going to happen to you, as Longlegs does. It happens to you. And then those clues are going to start adding up. Does it all add up? Well, stay tuned for spoilers to find out if it does.
And I will say this, we do our year-end podcast in December. We may have to add a new category this year, best marketing campaign, best trailer, however you want to say it, because the marketing campaign for this was genius. I mean, there's just no way around it. It was genius because it told you a little bit, but not enough. And I get it. You and I are a bit of outliers on the whole trailer thing where we don't want to know too much. Now, I'm more than you, meaning I like trailers. I just don't like when they give me the whole freaking movie. You don't want to see trailers at all. I would say the average movie fan, I don't want to speak for everyone in the audience, but if I was taking a poll, most people like trailers, but I think they're more in tune with me where it's like, I like a trailer, but I don't want you to give me the whole freaking plot of the movie. Give me a general idea. Is it horror? Is it comedy? I want to know the difference between this and like The Hangover. But other than that, I don't want to know too much. And I think more people are like that. Now, I understand, you sit on the further end of the spectrum, and I totally understand and respect that. But I do like a good trailer because it does get me excited. I like getting excited. I like getting the trailers and I love going to the previews. I love sitting to previews of the movies. It's just in recent years, they've just gotten way too comfortable just giving things away. But that being said, the marketing campaign for Longlegs was pure genius. I mean, whoever ran this thing at Neon, the studio who got this, give them a freaking raise, because the marketing for this movie was, I would argue, maybe the best marketing for a horror movie I've seen in years. I mean, years, because it started months ago. And let's remember, Neon is basically an A24, an indie studio. They're not out there making $100 million movies, and they're not making $1 billion with their movies at the theater. This is a small indie studio. To put this much time, effort, and I have to imagine at least some funding into it, to do this elaborate of a marketing campaign that goes back 4, 5, 6 months, genius, and kudos, because you gave me just a little bit of what I wanted. And as you said, because I avoided everything beyond that second trailer that I couldn't avoid, because it literally happened when I was seeing a movie in the theater and I was just sitting there stuck to watch it. But I avoided everything else. I avoided all the vignettes. I avoided all the behind the scenes stuff. I avoided every interview. And then I just took a deep dive after seeing the movie last night and read everything, because I had avoided so much. Like, I'm a huge, you know this, I'm a huge Micah Monroe fan. And I saw a million interviews out there, and I love reading interviews with Micah Monroe. She's one of my favorite actors. But I couldn't. I was like, I can't read anything. I don't want to. And this is before the movie came out. So I knew the sites like Hollywood Reporter, Variety, they were not putting spoilers in there. But still, I was like, I don't want to know anything. I don't want to know how she approached this movie. And then last night, I was just, freaking gorging myself on every interview I could find from her and Osgood Perkins and Nicolas Cage and everybody else. But the marketing campaign, just to wrap up on the marketing campaign was absolutely genius for this movie. Give whoever that is a raise. Brilliant. And I don't know that you could do this with a lot of horror films. I have no idea if it would be as genius, but less is more. But the great thing about this campaign was more is less is more, which what I mean by that is they did a million things. Vignettes, clips, trailers. None of it really gave away too much. And that's what I think was brilliant. It got me excited. It got me built up and anticipating this movie. But honestly, while you are right, if you watch the movie and go back, yes, there are things in there, but none of it really made sense just watching the trailer at the time. Like, coming back to it, I could be like, oh yeah, that was there. Oh yeah, that was in there. But really, I didn't, beyond the general bones of the story, a serial killer and an FBI agent hunting down the serial killer. That's literally all I knew. And the trailers didn't ruin that for me.
There was one little vignette I loved. I'm sure you've probably seen it by now, which was they recorded Micah Monroe's heartbeat the first time she saw Nicolas Cage in the makeup. I guess that's a minor spoiler. He doesn't quite look like Nicolas Cage in the movie. And that was a really cool, very visceral, like, little campaign. And I've really got to give credit to Oz Perkins and company and whoever made that little vignette. They do this thing where for a very split second, you see the playback screen. Now, when you're shooting 35 millimeter film, which they are in this movie, it plays back weirder because because of the signal that it's getting out of the diopter. So it looks kind of fuzzy and grainy and like from some other time. And you catch just like, it's not even a glimpse of his face. It's just like there's a shape. And we all know in the horror community, the shape means a lot of things, especially like, dangerous killer. And there was just this glance of him. And then you start hearing her heartbeat go crazy. And they say, they go, her resting heart rate's whatever, 74 beats a minute. And then they said when she saw him, it went up to 170. I have an Apple Watch on. Mine hits 170 when I'm like working out really, really, really hard, when I'm drenched in sweat. So that I was like, wow, that's impressive. Like, it's an impressive little piece that they made right there. Just teasing the idea that you're going to be so terrified when you see Nicolas Cage. And Nick Cage, listen, I'll be honest, without telling you anything about this, the story so far, the Nick Cage contingency was out in full force Thursday night at like 10:30 at night when I went to go see this movie. When they saw his name come up on the screen, they were cheering. These people were ready to see Nick Cage. Did he disappoint? Let's find out in spoilers, Damon.
Well, let me tell a little bit about this plot, and I mean a little bit about this plot, because even again, we do two sections of this podcast, especially with new movies, where we do non spoilers for people who haven't seen the movie, and then we get into spoilers for the people who have seen the movie or just don't care. And this is a harder one to do because I almost feel like telling you anything ruins the movie. Again, there's a segment of our audience that's probably listening saying, I don't give a shit. Like, just tell me about the movie. I don't really care. But there's going to be people who are going to be kind of in the middle of the road like me, where it's like, I know the general idea, but I don't know too much. And yes, there's going to be the Patrick stands who are going to say, don't tell me a fucking thing. But just, and what I'm telling you is not this is not. I mean, this is if you've seen the trailers, you understand this. But all I'm going to say about the plot is the story revolves around a decades-long serial killer, which I mentioned in the intro, a guy calling himself Longlegs. And these serial murders have been happening for decades, going back to the 60s, I think is when they say it started. The movie takes place in the 90s, by the way, but it starts in the 60s. And they've been investigating. They've got no leads, no answers, and they eventually introduce a character named Lee Harker, who is played by Micah Monroe, to help them investigate the Longlegs murders because she has a mind for this. I'm not going to say what that means, but she has a mind for this kind of work. And she starts digging in the case, and that they finally have their first real breakthrough in decades of actually hunting down the Longlegs killer. That's pretty much all I can tell you. And that's not ruining anything in the movie, and that's just giving you a couple names and an idea of what was already told in the trailer. The reason I'm not telling you anything more is because then you start getting into the deeper plot points. And I will warn our listeners right now, because we do have a lot of devoted listeners and we love every single one of you. And I generally like to at least go pretty deep into a non-spoiler review, because I want people who are like, I want to listen to what you guys have to say before I go see it, and then I want to go see it. So I try to give them as much, like, if we got a pie, I want to give them at least a couple slivers before we dig into like the deeper part of the pie, which is spoilers. It's harder to do with this movie because I feel like if I say too much, you're gonna like. I don't even want you to know if this is an apple pie or a cherry pie or a chocolate pie. You can't know that stuff. I want you to just, there's a crust.
Could be a meat pie. It could be a meat pie in there. Be prepared.
And I'm saying this because we're in a really rare situation, Patrick, where nothing has been spoiled, like publicly.
Yeah. And the trailers don't spoil anything.
It's kind of remarkable for this day and age.
It's really tough and the trailers don't spoil anything other than an FBI agent hunting down a serial killer. I'll give you some pros. The movie looks fantastic. The cinematography, it's A+. I mean, it's a very, very well made movie. You're going to get that. You're going to get dread. I was sitting next to a guy who may never have seen a horror movie in his life. He was jumping so hard, just to let you know. We'll get more into that later. Great performances. I don't think that, I think anybody could look up the cast list and go, oh, it's probably going to be pretty good. It is in that respect. Like, the performances are great. And I will say this, I don't think it's like many movies you typically see in this genre. I think it's very different. I might even use the word special, but that might be coloring it, like telling you how I feel about it. But it's like, it makes me think of Talk to Me last year. And yes, Talk to Me was our #1 film last year. But what we were so bowled over by was how original the idea was. This blends a few different worlds in a way that I hadn't seen quite blended before. And I was in for a real treat. And I know we have a lot of thoughts. So Damon, do you want to usher us into spoilers?
Well, let me say a couple things before we get to spoilers, just in terms of what people can expect. And what I mean by people to expect, just when you go in to see this movie without any preconceived notion or spoilers about what's going on. Now, you know this as well as I do, Patrick. You can watch the trailer, you can go on social media, and even if you do read an interview with Osgood Perkins that has nothing to do with the actual plot, like spoiler-wise, this is unavoidable. When you saw the original trailer, FBI agent serial killer, everyone got Silence of the Lambs vibes, right? That was just immediate. I mean, right? I'm not wrong about that, correct?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. So Osgood Perkins has said, yes, Silence of the Lambs aesthetically was an influence for this movie, and he understands it because you are talking about an FBI agent hunting down a serial killer in the 90s, which is literally the plot of Silence of the Lambs. The reason I'm bringing that up, for one major reason, and this is not a spoiler, I promise you, but don't go into this film thinking you're going to see the next Silence of the Lambs. I'm not setting you up for failure, and I'm not setting you up for disappointment. What I'm setting you up for is, do not go into this film thinking this is Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster part 2. It's not that. Are there bones of that? Are there elements of that? Absolutely. But the one thing I hate about comparisons is that we talked about it last week with Maxine, the expectations. As I said earlier, I had to kind of kill my expectations after Maxine and not go into this one because I felt like we talked about this on Thursday night. We were texting each other. I was like, I feel like I'm going to a concert right now. Like I'm so ready to see this movie already. But what I say about the Silence of the Lambs comparison, yes, the stories are, it's a FBI agent hunting a serial killer. Well, guess what? There's a billion movies about an FBI agent hunting a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
And this one does take place in the 90s. There are some pretty incredible performances here. Nicolas Cage does an incredible job. Micah Monroe does an incredible job. All that's there. But don't go into this movie. Don't set yourself up to think, I'm going to see Silence of the Lambs Part 2, or which I know they actually
updated or whatever.
Yeah. I don't want people to go in thinking that because this is its own film. And I mean that as a compliment because I feel like those comparisons have really drowned this movie because people have been searching for what is this? We know it's a serial killer. We know it's an FBI agent. What is this? And people have kind of become obsessed saying, I don't know what this movie is. It's like Silence of the Lambs. Yes, there are some very similar things, but go far beyond that. That's like me saying, this is a horror movie. Yes, it's a horror movie, but it goes so far beyond that. And that's what I'm only setting you up for that because I don't want people going into this saying everyone's talked about this like it's Silence of the Lambs. It's not. I'm not saying that for good or for bad, by the way. I'm just saying it's not that. Don't go into this movie theater thinking, oh, I'm going to get Silence of the Lambs updated. I'm going to get a 2024 Silence of the Lambs. I'm going to get the successor to Silence of the Lambs. Don't do that to yourself. Really, don't do that. It is not that movie, and it is its own art. We talk about this all the time with Hollywood, Patrick, and thankfully horror is one of the rare genres where, yes, we do get remakes, and yes, that happens quite often, but nowhere near as much as we get in other parts of cinema, so to speak. In horror, there's a lot of original ideas. Late Night with the Devil was one earlier this year. It was a totally original idea. Talk to Me last year, totally original idea. And I would say Longlegs is a totally original idea. So do not succumb to the pressure of this is Silence of the Lambs, this is Seven, this is whatever. This is Longlegs. Let it be Longlegs, is all I'm saying.
Well put. Yeah, it's nothing like those movies. And that's not for good or for bad. I'm just saying it's nothing like them. It really isn't. And at no point I was like, oh, they're totally doing the Silence of the Lambs thing here. And if you've watched all the trailers, you naughty little person over there listening to us watching all the trailers, you've been like, no, that looks like Buffalo Bill's little area. He's totally doing a Buffalo Bill thing. He's not. It's not. It's nothing like that movie. It's nothing like it. It is. You're right. You said it great. It's Longlegs. That's what it'll be. And from now on, people will go, oh, are these guys trying to do Longlegs? Because it's its own thing, and you're going to find out why.
And also, one other thing I'll say before spoilers is because, it's hard to talk about how much we liked or didn't like a movie without getting into spoilers. But I will say this. I feel like Longlegs is going to end up being one of the most divisive films of the year because I already looked. I'm not a big, this. I don't ever read a review before we see the movie.
Yeah.
But again, I went on a deep dive tonight, and I did go to Rotten Tomatoes because I am curious sometimes. I don't look at the reviews, but I look at the scores.
Yeah.
And right now I'll say the critic score is a lot higher than the audience score. That didn't surprise me because what last I saw. By the way, just to be totally open about this, I've seen it twice already. I saw it on Thursday night and I saw it again on Friday night, very purposefully because I knew this was going to be one of those really talked about horror films. I wanted to see it a couple of times. Thursday night, I went to a late showing, like a 10 o'clock showing. I had a smattering of people in my theater, probably 50 people in there, but it was a pretty big auditorium. Tonight, it was next to sold out. Like, there were still a few seats open, but I had people on every side of me, which I freaking hate. I like having a little bit of, I like having the buffer zone, as they call it in Seinfeld, but it was packed to the gills. And it was a different experience seeing it with a crowd of people, which was actually kind of cool. There's the part I do like. I don't really like people sitting next to me, but I do like a full theater.
Yeah.
My point about all this is I feel like this is going to be a very divisive film because I've gone back and watched friends of ours in the creator community on TikTok. Not calling people. I'll call one person out by name only because, she's a friend of ours, Sid, who is Horror Chronicles over on TikTok. This is her favorite horror movie of the year. I loved it. I freaking loved it. And I'm not going to paraphrase what she said, but she's like, this is my favorite film of the year so far. I've heard other people say, yeah, it didn't live up to what when I say it didn't live up to expectation, I know I just said expectation, but it didn't pay off the way I thought it was going to pay off. It didn't disturb me or scare me the way I thought it was going to scare me. When people were talking about it's the scariest movie in decades and blah, blah, blah. So my last thing before spoilers is warning you, just go in clean. Go in. As much as I want you to listen to our show and get something from it before you go see it, there are elements of Longlegs that I liked. There are elements of Longlegs that I didn't like. And you're like, stop sitting on the fucking fence, Damon. But I'm telling you this because I want you to go in as clean as possible and just judge for yourself, because I will say there's going to be a segment of people who are going to come out saying this was fucking nightmare fuel. I'm not going to be able to sleep tomorrow or tonight. There's going to be the other segment of people who are going to say, what the fuck was that? That didn't scare me at all. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But I want to be upfront and honest to tell you, you're going to get both segments in this movie. Am I wrong? I feel like you're going to get both.
I haven't just that's purely anecdotal, is that I haven't seen anyone on the flip side say, I'm super disappointed in this movie. I haven't seen anybody say that. Everybody's so far has either loved it or liked it. One of the two. But like, oh, it was cool. Or holy shit, it's my favorite. It's one of those things right now. I haven't seen anybody on the other side going, this didn't meet up to my expectations. Damon, shall we stop fucking pussyfooting around and get right to it?
Yeah, let's get into spoilers. So again, if you haven't seen Longlegs, it is in theaters now, so be forewarned. We are from here on out 110% spoilers. We are not pulling any punches, so be aware. So do you want to just talk about what this movie is actually about, Patrick?
Oh, I love it. I love it, Damon. Okay, so what's great about it is that in all these previews, you go, oh, okay, FBI agent. You meet Michael Monroe's character, Harker. And right away, there's this little exercise. They're having this little exercise. Feels very Silence of the Lambs. They're at their Quantico base or wherever the hell they are, wherever they're stationed. And they're like, all right, we're going to go out in the field. Teams of two, you're going to go figure this thing out. You're going to go knock door to door, same old shit. And you're like, okay. They're on a manhunt. Got it. Her and this random FBI bro, and that's still feeling very Silence of the Lambs. It's a guy, and he's like, hey, why don't you wait outside? I'll go knock on the door. And you're like, okay, still Silence of the Lambsy. Got it. And this is like, I don't know, what do you say? 10 minutes in, 5 minutes, 15, not even. Five to 7 minutes in max. And Micah Monroe, with that fantastic actor's face of hers, watches him walk away, and then her attention is drawn to this other house. And she goes, it's this one. Over here. And he's like, what do you mean? They go over there. The guy goes, I'll take the door. Hang back. I'll do this. He knocks on the door. He gets his fucking head blown off. You're like, whoa, what the fuck's going on exactly? Is that Longlegs in there? She goes in the house. It's all fucked up and all this shit. They catch the bad guy. End scene. Now she's sitting in a room. Motherfucking shit look like Blade Runner. And they're putting images in front of her that are completely abstract. And they're saying, what do you see? And then she'll say, canary, strawberry, blah, blah, blah. You're like, what the fuck is happening? What the fuck is happening? Then she meets Mr. Blair Underwood, who, by the way, is 60 years old, and he looks younger than me. Like, what the fuck is in the water at Blair Underwood's house? The man looks amazing. Did you watch L.A. Law growing up? I did. And so he was a fixture in my house.
I didn't, but I knew Blair Underwood was, and you just said he's 60, and he looks maybe 40. Maybe
he
40.
Looks 100%. He looks younger than me, and he could be my dad. That's how much older I digress. And basically what they are saying is there is this little division of the FBI that are basically psychics. Micah Monroe's character is at least somewhat psychically inclined. And they are using this little band of psychics to hunt down murderers. And truth be told, they don't even see that she's that great at it. They're like, you're like a half psychic. I think they said something like that. They're like, you're close, but you're not great. You passed the test about 50-50, which is basically a failing grade, but they're like, you have it, it's just not great. But you're like, what? Like, we're doing this? This is weird. And then the Longlegs case comes up. And it folds into her lap, and they go, this is a cold case. We're having trouble figuring it out. This Longlegs character, what's happening is, and this ties back to some of the great teasers, is what we suspect is happening is that somehow he is infiltrating these families, maybe in a cult manner, maybe in brainwashing or something, but basically he's getting the fathers of these families to murder the family and then kill themselves. But it's not a murder-suicide. It's a murder-murder. Because we know that this Longlegs guy is there. He leaves this message at these houses. It's the calling card, but he's never in the house. He never seems to be there. There's no forced entry. There's no sign of struggles or anything like that. It's almost as if these people, someone just flipped a switch and the dad just went fucking apeshit on everybody and they're all dead and Longlegs is taking the credit for it. Blair Underwood hands all over the paperwork to Micah Monroe's character and says, give it a shot. You got a failing grade. This is a cold case. This is like win-win for me. So just go ahead and have at it and see what happens. Well, Micah Monroe really takes to this case and she starts honing in on Longlegs. In fact, another murder pops up in very coincidentally in the time that she decided to start snooping around for Longlegs. And that's where this wild ride begins. And Damon, if that sounds like the crazy part, it's not. That's the normal part of this movie. And then it gets crazy.
So saying the quiet part out loud now, when I said it's not Silence of the Lambs, that's why I said it. Because immediately when you learn that she's like half a psychic, you're like, oh no, she's not Clarice Starling. And that's what I said. Like, I hate the comparison because there is a much more supernatural element to this movie, and that set the tone right out of the gate. When she looks at the house, she's like, he's in there. And her partner's like, all right, calm down. She's like, we should call for backup. And he's like, calm down. I got this. Like, let me just go knock on the door. And then he gets his head blown off. And then again, he says, like, when she's sitting in the car with Blair Underwood's character, he said, well, he's like, how did you get 8 numbers right? Because during the test, they say we've got a number between 0 and 100. What is it? And she starts spouting off numbers, and he says, how did you get 8 right? And she goes, I also got 8 wrong. He goes, well, half a psychic's better than no psychic. So, like, this is like a thing. Like, they're acknowledging this is part of the FBI program. And so right away, you're like, okay, this is not Silence of the Lambs because Clarice Starling was not a psychic. So right away, that's why I said, get that Silence of the Lambs stuff out of your head outside of this is FBI hunting a serial killer.
And I want to say, too, on that topic, they play this completely straight. Yeah. Nothing about the psychic. Like, it's almost like if you've heard about like rumors that back in like, the 60s or whatever, like the CIA was working like on mind control and stuff like that. It's almost like they're genuinely trying to do it. It doesn't feel like some weird fantasy world or some weird shit. It's like, no, this is just a division of the FBI where we're like, yeah, let's try it out and see if it works because it'll help us track down some killers. I just wanted to add that so that people don't think that the movie is trying to color it as strange or like we're in a strange, like tweaked world. We're not. We're in the very real world with a division of the FBI that uses psychics to hunt down serial killers.
Yeah. So once Harker gets involved and so basically Longlegs leaves these letters at every scene, and there's this uncodable language to the letters, and at the end it just says Longlegs. So every letter is something they've not been able to decode, but every single one ends with the signature Longlegs. So they know it's Longlegs, but they have no idea what these letters are, and the FBI has been trying to decipher these things. They said the first murder happened in 1966. It's now 1990 something, and by the way, they're in Oregon is where this is actually happening at.
Yeah.
1990 something because there's a big photo of Bill Clinton on the wall, so we know it's the 90s. So these have been going on for 30 years, and no one's been able to decode a single message. Well, once Lee Harker gets on the case, she gets involved, and when she goes home after the first night of her investigation, looking at all the case files and everything, she gets a weird knock at her door, and she sees an ominous, shadowy figure outside, and she goes outside to see what it is, and when she looks back inside, she sees someone in her house. She runs back inside, and she finds a letter sitting on her desk that says, "For Lee Harker, don't open until January 14th." Well, of course, she opens it up, and she finds a birthday card inside, and it's happy 9th birthday, and she opens it up, and it has the Longlegs thing, but it actually has something in there from the sea to the sand. It's a letter, but that actually has the correlating figures underneath it, and then the back is another letter. She figures out this is coding to decode the letters. Like Longlegs has left her a birthday card that essentially lets her know how to decode it. But when she decodes the letter on the back, it says, "Don't tell anyone how you learn to decode this, or I will basically cut off your mother's tits and bleed her out." And so she has to keep this a secret that she got this letter from Longlegs, but Longlegs allowed her to decode his letters by using the Bible. And so now she's able to go back in time and start rereading these letters and actually knowing what he's been saying for the past 30 years. And so that gets us deeper into the investigation, which we learn, of course, it has satanic roots to it. A lot of his messages are coded in Satanism and Bible verses in the book of Revelation. Not Revelations, it's not plural, as Lee Harker points out during one part of the movie. And so she starts decoding these letters, and they start really digging into the investigation. But right away, when you realize that Longlegs has paid a visit to Lee Harker, you're kind of like, what is the connection? Why is there a connection between Lee Harker and Longlegs, and how did he get into her house and leave her a little note that says, "Happy 9th birthday"? And that's a big unraveling of the plot, is the connection between Lee Harker and Longlegs.
And yeah, and man, the next stage in this unraveling, without having to tell anybody, we don't want to narrate the whole story here, but basically the next unraveling, the next little piece, is that she discovers an algorithm, a pattern, which there's nothing odd about that. Serial killers have a pattern. The pattern is those birthdays. Those birthdays matter. The victims, all of the houses, all of the families, the daughter's birthday was on the 14th. Harker's birthday's on the 14th. Blair Underwood's daughter's birthday's coming up. It's in the movie. Gosh, I wonder what date it's fallen on. We don't know. How could we know? No one seems to know. But birthdays are this thing. Birthdays are like kind of this other piece of the puzzle. And that starts unraveling. And you talk about the fact that why is Longlegs like connected to her? And this is the part of the movie that started to turn my head. And I wrote in my notes at one point, I go, how is this all going to play out? I don't get it. And then a new revelation, a new wrinkle comes up in the second part of the movie, and that is the dolls. And they were in those little teasers. Now that I've looked back, you've seen the dolls in the teasers, and you're like, I don't get it. What are the dolls? What could that mean? What does it mean? Guess what? You'll never guess what it means. But these dolls come out, and they find a doll trapped in a house, and it's the creepiest fucking doll you've ever fucking seen. And they don't understand how it works, and they pop up in its head, and it's got a fucking steel ball in it, like a phantasm ball minus the blades, sitting in their head. And they're like, what the fuck is this? And these little escalations, I mean, these are clues. This is a horror video game. You're basically walking around finding clues, and it's not getting easier to understand. It's getting stranger and stranger and stranger, to the point that I was like, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. And there's one little wrinkle left that we haven't brought up. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a few, but the wrinkle in terms of clues is that there was one survivor to one of these families, played by the way, Kiernan Shipka, who we loved in Totally Killer. I think she did a great job. I didn't even fucking recognize her in this movie. She was at school. She happened to be at school the day that the Longlegs killing happened at her house. So she survived, but boy, she wasn't doing well afterwards. And she has this long, drawn-out conversation with Harker, and in that moment, I was like, dude, I feel like I'm literally sitting with one of the Manson girls. I don't understand what she's saying. It's not really piecing together. It doesn't make sense. Brilliant piece of writing, which apparently was right off the page. I did like you, and I went and deep dived as many interviews I could with Oz Perkins afterwards. And he's like, that's straight off the page, and that's just what Kiernan put on it. She put her little thing on it, but those are the words. And I was like, that's kind of brilliant, because I used to be pretty obsessive about watching Charlie Manson videos from prison. That man spoke absolute gibberish, the gibberish of an absolute psycho. And that's what Kiernan Shipka's character was doing to her. And she was just kind of going on and on and on, but she gave this little hint. She goes, well, and they mentioned, by the way, that someone mysteriously had visited her just last week. God, I wonder who that was. Who could that have been?
And she was catatonic before that. Like, she was completely catatonic.
Thank you.
And then suddenly she wakes up, and now she's just like, she's not normal, but she's talking like she never skipped a day in her life.
Yeah. She's talking shit. She's talking some crazy shit. And she's feeling real good. And she goes, he just makes me feel a certain way, and I'll probably do whatever the hell he needs me to do. And you go, oh, that sounds awfully familiar. And the wrinkles continue. And she says something, and I can't remember what it was. Damon, help me out, because you have seen the movie twice. But she even alludes to thinking that maybe Harker herself has a doll. Maybe Harker is a doll. She's like looking at her. She's like, I think you might be a doll too. And you're like, what, those fucking crazy weird dolls that make no sense, that we don't make any sense of? What does this all mean? How on earth is this going to end? How? Like, I was like, we're getting deep into this movie. How is this going to wrap itself up? And I did not see how it was wrapping itself up. I really didn't, because again, Damon, I'll say it as like I said before, despite the fact that there's a lot of supernatural talk with the psychic ability and all that stuff, this movie plays itself very grounded. I think all the characters, all the FBI agents, they are trying to play it straight. They are trying to track down a killer who is making other people kill other people. Like, they got to figure this out. They're playing it straight. And when it all comes crashing down, the reveal, I was like, whoa, that's really out there. That I did not see it coming. I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
So let me real quick, again, I know we don't want to rehash the whole thing, but I do want to get into details, because I feel like, for lack of a better word, the devil's in the details of this movie. Going back to Kiernan Shipka, which she had worked with Osgood Perkins on his first film, The Blackcoat's Daughter, which is actually a really good movie. Has her in it. It has Emma Roberts and somebody else is in that movie. I can't remember who it is, but it's a really solid movie. And he brought her in. She worked for one day. Brought her in for one
Yeah.
day, and she did that role. And it's fucking incredible. She's awesome in this movie. What I paid attention to the first time was her saying, I would do anything for him. If he told me to go outside and jump off this building right now, I would do it. If he told me to come over there and kill you, I would jump over there and smash your fucking face in. That was very haunting because she does it in a very and if he told me to jump over there and kill you right now, I would just jump over there and bash your fucking face in, or something to that effect.
And that's about the clearest. That's about the clearest she ever was in that conversation, where it's like, oh, she's mysterious. Not in this instance.
And that's what caught my attention. After seeing it and then going back and see it again, when she says very early on, she says, I've seen you before, haven't I? You've been to my house. And I'm like, huh? And then after seeing the movie, it all started to come together and make sense. So Carrie Ann Canada is her name. That's the Canada farm. That's where all these letters they've been hinting at. All the fun was at the Canada farm. And that's where they go to Camera Farm. Sorry, I said Canada.
Yeah.
Camera Farm. Carrie Ann Camera. All the fun's at the Camera Farm, and X marks the spot. So that's where Harker and is it Carter? That's his name, right? Agent Carter?
Yeah, it's Carter.
They go to the farm and they find the X's and they go upstairs and they uncover the doll that you mentioned earlier. And that's where, what is this doll thing? So we start to realize, all this investigation's happening, and eventually Carrie Ann actually does jump off the building and kill herself because apparently that's what Longlegs told her to do. But Harker eventually goes back to the office with her boss, and her boss is like, there's something you're not telling me here. There's something going on you're not telling me about. He's like, I looked at your file. Your mother reported a trespasser on your property right around your 9th birthday of a weird guy in your yard with pale skin and creepy. And this sounds too suspicious not to have some connection to what we're dealing with right now. And Harker's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no memory of this. He's like, maybe you should go home and talk to your mother. And maybe she has some memory of this. And when she does, her mother, when we meet her, is played by Alicia Witt, who is a great actor in her own right. She's got long, kind of grayish, brownish hair. And she's like a 1,000-yard stare all the time. Looking off in the distance. She talks to you, but she never talks to you. She's just in her own world, and she's just like, are you still saying your prayers? Very creepy, but you could just tell, she's, what she reminds me of, and I know it sounds terrible to say this, you've seen the movies where back in the day they used to think shock therapy would actually work.
Oh, yeah.
That, she looks like she's the aftermath of shock therapy, where she just got her brain fried, and now this is all that's left. And so she just keeps reverberating back to, do you still say your prayers? Very soft-spoken, very Carrie Ann Camera. But at the time, you don't know that. So she goes back and she says, Mom, what do you remember about my 9th birthday? And she says, I don't remember anything. Nothing. You shouldn't either. And she's like, go look in your room. You can look. I've touched nothing. Go look in your room. And so she grabs this trunk from her room and takes it back to her house, and she starts digging through everything, and she gets this little lock box. It's like a little, like a jewelry box. Pops it open, and there's a rubber band around a group of Polaroids. The movie opens with a little girl going out into a yard, and she's got a Polaroid camera around her neck. None of it makes sense until this moment. She unravels the photos, and she starts looking, and then she comes to one, and boom! Flash. It's like she got smacked with a hammer. And we go back to that time and we learn Longlegs visited her house in 1974, just a few days before her birthday. And that's where we open the movie, where we see this little girl encountering Longlegs, the very beginning of the movie. That was Lee Harker. And that's where he says, how are you, little angel? Your birthday's just a few days away. And we learned that she was going to be a victim. Her family was going to be a victim of Longlegs, but her mother, Ruth, basically made a deal with the devil where she would become an acolyte of Longlegs and basically more or less deliver and do his dirty work for him under the promise that he would never hurt or harm her daughter. So when we meet Ruth Harker in almost a catatonic state of her own, that 1,000-yard stare I'm talking about, it's not because she's had electrotherapy. It's because she's been doing Longlegs' dirty work for the past 30, 20 some odd years since 1974. So that's why the FBI never had any physical evidence that Longlegs was ever in the house. He never touched the letters, nothing. It's because Ruth Harker has been going to these houses dressed as a nun, delivering these look-alike dolls that look like the daughters in the house. She delivers these dolls, and when they open the dolls up, there's like a demonic influence that's in those little brain pellets, those little spherical, empty brains pellets in the dolls. They open the doll, it releases this demonic force, this influence over the family. And that's where everything goes fucking haywire, where the dad kills everybody and then kills himself at the end. And she's just been tormented by this for 20 some odd years, carrying out Longlegs' orders. And we come to find out the really fucked up part about all this, Longlegs has been living in their basement this entire time. Like, his doll shop is in their fucking basement. It's a locked door that we see her early when she goes to visit her mom. The door's locked. She sees a roach come out. She's like, that's weird. But that's the end of it. She looks for a key briefly, and then her mom calls her, and she goes to help her mom. But later in the film, we learn that Longlegs' fucking shop is in their basement. He's been living there the entire time that she's been there. But her mother's been tormented by this, so her mother has basically become the delivery system for Longlegs, dropping off these dolls that are lifelike dolls. And by the way, did you hear the inspiration behind the doll?
No.
This is really fucked up. And this messed with me. So the inspiration for the doll came from the real life case of JonBenet Ramsey. You remember?
Oh shit, I have heard. I did read this. Yeah, I read so many things. Yeah, I remember.
So
this.
JonBenet Ramsey, everyone remembers this story. I think she was like 6 years old. Who was like a little 6-year-old beauty queen. She got murdered in her own house. And when she died, her parents, it was around Christmas, her parents had bought her a life-size doll that was basically a replica of her in all these beauty pageants, and it was wrapped up in a box under the Christmas tree when she was murdered. So she got murdered.
It was in the basement.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, it was in the house at the same time.
Yes, it was in the house. Yeah.
So when they found it after she had been murdered, they were struck by it because it looked like their daughter in a coffin, because it was literally a life-size replica of their daughter in this box. How fucking creepy is that? And that was the inspiration for the look-alike dolls that the doll maker, who was Longlegs, would make of these girls, and that little spherical object was where he hid the demonic magic that would get unleashed in like this black cloud of smoke that would infect the father, infect the family, and then everything would go haywire and they kill each other. So essentially, Lee's mother has been protecting her for 20 some odd years from Longlegs, but she's also been acting as his agent, as his accomplice to deliver these dolls and going in dressed as a nun, because it's unassuming. She knocks on the door, they answer this, you want a prize from the church. They let her in because she's a sweet looking nun. And she walks in, she gives the daughter the doll gets opened, the demonic force gets let loose, and the dad kills everyone. That's how this has all been happening, and it's all been Lee Harker's mother this entire time. And that's what unravels, and Lee's mind is like, fucking, pea soup at that point.
Yeah, because at some point they finally track him down, right? They're like, okay, we know where we're going to find him. He's standing on the side of the road waiting for them. But they go, this isn't enough. He had an accomplice. He was never in any of these houses. We know that. And the shock is that it was her mom the whole time. That brings up a lot of questions, Damon. One question is, was he making dolls somewhere else before this? And then he chose them to start making dolls at their house? another question I had was, or is he Harker's father, who we never meet, we never hear about, ever? And were they under his spell? And right around her ninth birthday, he's like, cool, you know what we're going to do for your ninth birthday? We're going to murder you. But there's this weird little caveat. I don't, tell me if you caught this in your two viewings, that like there's something about like, if you don't believe in me, if you don't, like we're talking about Satan here. Satan's demonic possession is in these dolls. If these people don't immediately adhere to Satan, he will destroy them. That is the rule, and it happens 10 out of 10 times. So were they under the spell of Satan this whole time? And that's why they were never touched? I'm like, it raises this grand revelation raises more questions than it answers, because a lot has to happen. By the way, I mean, the fact that Longlegs lived in her house, it's like, what? Like, you didn't know that? Now, of course, if she has a doll of herself, it controls her mind, you know, like, and they show it in action in this movie. When this doll is in your house with your family, they can't break its spell. They are very much under its spell. So Harker has been under her doll's spell at minimum since her ninth birthday. But I'm like, man, this opens up a lot of questions.
So I think, so the way I don't think it's her father. I really don't think that's.
I mean, that was a wild, you know,
yeah,
theory.
When she sees, because when she sees him in the yard, when we see the flashback, she's just like, "Get away from my daughter, you freak!" And then, you know, that's when we learn.
But what if she's under his spell and she has no idea?
I don't think so at that point, because once, and also, as you mentioned, under the spell, he has a life-size doll built of Lee, and that's his plan, is to kill her. And it's only after her mother basically says, I will become your willing slave to do your bidding as long as you don't harm my daughter. And so the threat that Longlegs keeps is that he keeps the doll of her in that house. So he still has the ability to use that evil dark magic to do something to her daughter. So that's how he keeps her under control this entire time, because as long as that doll's present, Lee is more or less got some level of control over Lee, which is how we have to assume that during her entire childhood and years later, she never knew about Longlegs living in their basement. It's not until she goes back that final time when she's asking her mom, like, you know, hey, like they figure out that her mom knew way more than she was telling them. And so while they're at the FBI, they're like, go, you need to go, like, talk to your mom right now. And so she goes with an FBI agent, Carter's other partner, Browning, I think is her name. And she's like, I'm going to go in and talk to my mom and tell her we just need to bring her in for questioning. She doesn't want to alarm her mother, but she knows there's more. She knows her mother knows more than what she's telling them. And while they're there, you see in the garage, they've got the cover over the station wagon that Longlegs has been driving to all these houses. And that's when you realize he's been living there the entire time. That's been his residence, is their house. But because this demonic influence is there, she's never known about it. It's almost like this cloud of like secrecy that she's never known it was there. It's only after she starts to discover more about who Longlegs actually is that she actually kind of breaks through the fog of this control he had over her, because she starts to remember. And that's what whatever the hold was he had over Lee, the way I read it is that once she starts to learn about her past, about Longlegs, about the connection to her mother, she starts to remember, and that control over her gets broken. And so
they shot the ball. They like destroyed the ball.
Well, that's later though. That's after after Longlegs is dead, because Longlegs gets captured, and they bring him into the FBI headquarters, and Lee Harker goes down to interview him. And that's the scene where the whole, you know, heartbeat thing went from, you know, 74 beats per minute to 170 beats per minute. And she interviews him, and he intimates that he knows far more about Lee Harker than, you know, anyone knows. Like, when they show her a video before that, he sings happy birthday to her in a very creepy way. He's like, happy birthday, Lee Harker. And they're like, yeah, this goes on for 24 minutes. And they finally take her down to her, and she starts talking to him. That's when they come to face for the first time, and he's just saying all these creepy things, hinting at a past with her, hinting at a past with her mother. It's all very creepy. And then at the end, he goes, "Hell, Satan!" He starts smashing his fucking head into the table and literally turns his face into mush, kills himself, and Lee is just, I mean, she's blown away. She doesn't know what to do. She stands back, blood all over. All the FBI agents come running in, and Longlegs is dead. And Carter admonishes her. He's like, "What the fuck? Like, I sent you in there to get answers. Now he's dead. We're never going to answer this case." At this point, they still don't know for sure her mother's involved. So when she goes to visit her mother walks outside, blows away the other FBI agents, just like kills her because she's trying to cover this up. And at the very end, you see the life-size doll of Lee and her mother standing there with the shotgun, and she says, "He's dead. He's gone. I'm going to free you." And so she shoots the doll, everything blows up, and Lee passes out because that's the control it had over her, and that's when it finally dissipates. And then when she wakes up, she realizes that even though Longlegs is dead, they always keep referencing the man downstairs. Even Carrie Ann Cameron says the real power is the man downstairs. It's Satan. That's what they're alluding to as Satan. He's the real power here. It's not Longlegs, it's Satan. So even after Longlegs is dead, while Lee's mother is able to blow the doll's head off to free her daughter from being controlled by Longlegs, she's made a literal deal with the devil. She's not free of it. So she still has to carry out his demands, his commands, and that's where we get to the end of the movie, which is the next murder she's supposed to carry out is of the Carter family, of Agent Carter and his wife and his daughter. And when Lee Harker wakes up, she knows that's where her mother's headed.
Yeah. Oh, she gets the phone call, Damon. That was wild. She gets the phone call.
Yeah, you're late for
birthday. Yeah, and you're like, who the fuck's on the phone? We just saw, Longlegs' face is smashed to bits. Who just called? And she runs over there. She forgot about the birthday that she said she was going to. And you get to see how it works. There's Mom sitting there across from them. The doll is revealed. Everyone is under its spell. They just act strange. I don't even know quite how to describe how they are. Like, slightly euphoric. Agent Carter, not so euphoric. You can see the anger boiling in him, and you're like, oh no, he's ready to snap. And this family is going to perish under this. How do you break this spell? How do you break this cycle? How do you break any of this? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Harker blows her mom's head off, right? She shotguns her right there. She kills her mom, and she kills Agent Carter because Agent Carter kills his wife. They go in the kitchen. That might be my favorite. We don't do best line because we can't pull it from the movie. My best line is because Carter's getting pissed. You can tell the rage is building, and he goes. She says something about maybe it's time to bring in the cake. And he goes, "I'm going to cut the fucking cake. Don't you remember you just told me to do it?" And you're like, yeah, he's about to snap. And he goes, "Honey, would you like to come in the kitchen and help me cut up the cakes?" And she's like, "Sure, honey." And she goes, "We'll be right back." And he goes, No, I'll be right back. You'll still be in the kitchen. Because he's basically telling him he's going to kill his wife. And he goes in there, kills his wife, comes back out with a knife. He's about to kill his daughter. Harker kills him, kills her mom. And then it's just her and Ruby in the room. And that's basically how it ends. Yeah. And you're just like, fuck, this is fucked. And we say all this, Satan is at play here. We were playing everything as straight as we could. Then we got to these weird balls in the brains of these weird dolls, and Longlegs saying, "Hail Satan." He means it. Satan's there. The figure is there. It's alluded to it, and it manifests itself in a kind of a classic kind of Baphomet shape, like a silhouette. You can see it. The devil's at play. And I was like, whoa, like this movie took a big old turn, like into the supernatural, but in such a grounded language. I can't begin to tell you how straight this movie plays itself. it's a funny movie too. There's a lot of laughs. I don't know. I'm sure your crowd probably laughed a lot. There's a lot of little funny moments in this movie, darkly funny movie. But Oz Perkins said something that I really loved. He goes, "I don't know why people don't play enough in this pool when it comes to horror. You can do anything you want with horror. I mean, we sit here all the time. We talk about Freddy and Jason, things that are like literally impossible. We just take for granted, and we ground them in our world." And he's like, "Why not go all the way? Why not go as crazy as you want to go?" And Oz went crazy with this story and went like, "It's the devil." No, no, guys, it's really the devil. And he packs himself and his evil into these little metal balls, and they put them in these dolls, and it glamours these people. And you're like, yeah, but this movie was so normal until it wasn't normal. Because he's like, why should it be normal? And I was like, yeah, you got a great point. Why should it be normal? You should go way the fuck off the fucking reservation. And he did.
Patrick, do you want to talk real quick about the big plot hole, because we got to get to that at some point. And you pointed this out to me. You pointed out to me, and I realized it in the movie, but it didn't really like bludgeon me over the head. And then you pointed out to me, and so when I saw it the second time, I went in specifically looking like, did we miss something? And then I came home and said, no, we didn't miss anything.
Yeah,
I want to let you pull at this thread.
So I knew Damon was going to see this movie twice. I don't have the schedule to do it, but he does, thankfully. And we didn't talk about the movie, but I just texted you. And I was like, I'm back from it, and you just wanted to know my initial thoughts. And all I really said was, how the fuck does nobody put two and two together while they're investigating this? As I mentioned earlier, they discovered the algorithm, and what they can relate it to is that all of these families, the daughter has a birthday within 6 days of the 14th. That's always the case.
All the daughters have the birthday of the 14th. The murders happen within 6 days.
The murders happen within 6 days of it, excuse me.
Yeah.
Well, Agent Carter's daughter's birthday is on the 14th. He knows that. Agent Harker tells him that to his face. Now, he's portrayed as a guy who maybe drinks a little too much. He's not terribly interested in his job. But I guarantee you one thing. He knows the date of his daughter's birthday. They're talking about her birthday at one point, very early in the movie. He's like, yeah, her birthday's next week. Why don't you come over? He knows when her birthday is. He knows what date it is. He knows when Harker told him that these murders happen within this vicinity of these birth dates, and it's always a daughter. It's literally like, oh my God, your daughter's a target.
And Harker's birthday is the same day, because they mentioned like Harker's mom says, your birthday is next week. Are you coming to see me? And she says, I'll try, Mom. So what they're intimating is that Harker's birthday is, we know Harker's birthday is on the 14th because she was a target. What that means is that Carter's daughter is the same. Like they never mentioned that they literally share a birthday on the same day, but they have to, because this isn't happening over several months. Harker's birthday is the next week, and then while she's at Agent Carter's house, Carter's daughter says, would you like to come to my birthday party next week? And she says, sure, I'll come. Like, they just say it totally like, like very like oblivious to what's going on. But Harker and the daughter have the same birthday.
I get that like Harker wouldn't know, because I assume she's under the spell of her doll. So I was like, okay, she is fogged. She doesn't really relate her life to this. But the daughter was this massive red flag. I was like, no, she knows that the birthdays line up. She knows it has to be a daughter. And he knows his daughter's birthday. How the hell did they not go, my daughter could be a target? They knew a death happened because very early on in the movie, when they give her the case, they realize that a Longlegs murder had just happened about a month ago. So they know it's still active. They're very aware that this case went from cold to hot very quick. And then he's even like, hey, you know what's kind of weird? Is that once you joined the case, shit popped up. And it seems weird because your mom reported a guy coming to your house on your 9th birthday. That shit's weird. He's getting savvy to all this shit, but he doesn't put it at any point, doesn't put it together in his head My daughter's birthday's next week on the 14th. The 14th's a problem. The daughters are a problem. Like, my daughter's a target. Why that never comes up in this movie is a massive, to me, massive, massive plot hole. And you confirmed it when you saw it the second time. They hope nobody noticed, I guess.
Well, and yeah, they never do. They never. I was watching specifically for that, being like, did they even acknowledge it? They never acknowledged it. And actually, it was only upon the second viewing that I realized, yeah, Harker and the daughter have the same birthday. They have to, because Harker's birthday is the next week, and that's when Ruby's birthday is. So it has to be the same day. Like, if it's the 14th, it has to be the same day. My only, like, this is just me throwing out ideas that it doesn't excuse it. Let me be clear about this. This doesn't excuse it. The only reason why I think Carter may be a little more oblivious to this is because they make it very clear, even though early on he says it's better to have half a psychic than no psychic. Throughout the entire film, he keeps saying this is all bullshit. It's not supernatural. It's a man, a flesh and blood killer. He says that like 4 times. There's no hocus pocus here. There's no magic here. There's no dark spell. It's a guy killing these people. They make it a point to have him say that, even though 5 minutes into the movie he says, well, half a psychic's better than no psychic. It's a weird. That was my own. Like, he's just a non-believer, so he doesn't actually believe this matters, I guess, is the only. But it doesn't excuse it, because even if it doesn't matter, every murder for the past 10 murders, these 10 families have all had a daughter on the 14th. Your daughter has a birthday on the 14th. You would at least acknowledge it and say, my daughter's birthday is on the 14th, but I'm going to make sure nothing bad happens to her. Something, acknowledge it. I'm fine with the ending being what it is. It's Agent Carter's family. It's kind of a deliciously perfect ending with, her mother going after her boss in this house, these people that she went to meet, begrudgingly had to meet. She didn't want to meet his family. You can tell she's very disconnected. She doesn't want to have any personal relationships with the people she works with, but he kind of forces her into it. Like, she takes him home, and he's like, well, come on in, meet the family. She's like, sir, I'd rather not. And he's like, yeah, I don't give a shit. You're coming in to meet the family. And she said, it's very awkward. And it's kind of funny. But yeah, like, I'm fine with all that. But the fact that they never acknowledge that not only does Harker and the daughter have the same birthday, they have to, they never acknowledge that she would be a target. And that seems like a really big plot hole to avoid.
It's almost like they were like, "Ooh, you know what? This is a plot hole, but let's just hope nobody notices." Like, we
Yeah.
just got to power into this. We got to get to this ending, and that is my big beef with this movie. Other than that, I fucking love this movie. Other than that, this movie is vibelicious. Like, if all those trailers were setting a mood, you get it. It gets delivered. It's creepy. It's weird. It's strange. It's executed well. And I was just like, but wait a minute. Wait a minute. How did they not put 2 and 2 together? They were being clear about everything. They were solving the case. I mean, we were getting a police procedural. They were piecing this thing together. And so I was like, but that's a big part of the piece that they all know. And they know when the daughter's birthday is. That's crazy.
So let me say this. About my overall feelings about the movie before we get into categories and everything. One, ultimately, I would say I did like this movie. I would say it's a very well executed movie, with the exception of that one massive plot hole, and the twists and turns were really convincing and really cool, because, again, finding out that her mother has been the acolyte of Longlegs this entire time is a pretty fucking great twist. That being said, at this point, I would hope people who are listening to this have either seen it or just don't care, and they're listening to spoilers. I've seen so many people say this is the scariest film of the decade, it's the scariest film I've seen in years. I don't think it's that. There were a couple jumpy moments. It's not scary, it's creepy, and it's disturbing. Now, I know people are saying, well, that's a form of scary. You're right, it is a form of scary.
Yeah.
For me, I was never scared. There was a couple creepy moments, there were some disturbing moments, but there were no moments where I was like, shit, like this is scary. I never had that feeling of like true scared in my heart like I did the first time I saw Session 9, which was one of my favorite scary movies that scared the piss out of me the first time I saw it. So I'm setting that as an expectation to say that I didn't think that I thought this movie was creepy. I thought it was disturbing, but it didn't really scare me. But there was one review out there that I read, and I don't remember the exact title, but I think this was encapsulated very well. It said something, it was from Rolling Stone. It said something to the effect of Longlegs isn't a true FBI serial killer story. It's nightmare fuel. And I was like, yeah. And that's where I go back to the whole, this isn't Silence of the Lambs. Stop making that comparison. And by the way, we're not making that comparison. Osgood Perkins made that comparison. He talked about it nonstop. He said that scene where Longlegs is standing at a bus stop with his bags packed and the police surround him and he just gives himself up. He said very openly, that was my John Doe moment from Seven, where he just walks in and says, detectives, you're looking for me. And they're like, oh shit, he's here. He said very openly, like, that was my Seven moment. This was my Silence of the Lambs moment. It's not that. Stop doing it. Don't go in thinking it's that. So I like this movie. It was creepy. It had a great vibe to it. The action, the acting, the performances were all incredible. I enjoyed all of that. But I would say that this is a far creepier, more disturbing movie than it is scary. And I know that's a weird line to draw, and I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to argue. I'm not trying to say, well, it's not scary. It didn't scare me in that way. It was creepy and disturbing. That I loved it in that way. But there was never, like, there were legitimate moments in Silence of the Lambs where I was like, oh shit, like in the moment to compare it to Silence of the Lambs, when she's in the dark and, James Gumb has the night vision, that's fucking freaky. That's a freaky scene. This is not that. It's a creepy vibe. It's nightmare fuel. I think that is a good way to describe this movie. It is creepy as fuck, and it is disturbing, but it never really scared me. I don't know how it felt for you, Patrick.
Damon, if only we had a category for this that we have had since day one,
Yeah.
and I will leave my answer until then. But, I mean, since we're talking categories, is it time to roll to them?
Yeah, let's get into categories. There's a lot to get to with this movie, because this will also allow us to dig deeper and deeper into this movie. And let's kick things off, as we do each and every week here on the show, with best performance. And Patrick, last week with Maxine, we kind of went in the same direction. I said we can't really go in a different direction because the performance was Mia Goth, and it's her movie, so yes. I'd love to sit here and say that I'm going to give it to somebody else, but we have the same best performance, and I don't want to change it just for the sake of being contradictory. Best performance, Patrick, in Longlegs.
It was a unanimous decision, Damon, as they say in your daytime profession. Unanimous decision from all judges. The best performance goes to Micah Monroe as Agent Harker. I'll just quote Oz Perkins because I read one interview where they were talking about how Micah Monroe was actually turned down for the role. She was very keen on the script and she was being kind of persistent. And, Oz said, hey, I just, truth be told, I just kind of got inundated with a lot of great actors wanting to play this role. So it wasn't a matter of I didn't think she was right for it. I just sort of kept seeing an interesting actor and trying to play that game. And I really relate to that. Just going, I'm currently trying to cast a short film, and that's kind of the problem. I have an actor I like, but I keep seeing more actors, and I'm like, oh, I kind of want to try. Let me try that one instead. Let me try that one. I think that's what Oz is going through. But then he said something that I think nailed it for me this time around. So I'll just use the director's descriptor. He said, Micah Monroe has an incredible ability to show on screen that she is hiding something. That acting is about what you don't hear come out of their mouth. It's about what you see on the character themselves. And he nailed it. That's why Micah Monroe ultimately, even after him telling her, hey, no thanks, he looked at another tape and went, you know what? Here's what I see. This character is hiding something in her subconscious. She's hiding something that she doesn't even know she's hiding. That she's under the spell of the devil. She doesn't even know that. But something about this character has to know it deep down, way back in the recesses of her brain, that she knows more about this case than even she knows. That it's going layers down. And that nuance that is necessary for what is on the page for the character comes out in her performance. She is withholding something from me. And I'm like, what is it? What are you hiding from me, Micah Monroe? What is it? And then it's beautifully revealed. And she doesn't play it over the top or anything. Like, I love The Watcher, and I think it was one of my top 5 horror films the year it came out, and that Micah Monroe's a star of that as well. She has the ability to look upon the camera without saying a word and making things happen. That's the mark of a great actor, and Micah Monroe's got it.
Micah Monroe is one of my favorite actors, period. I did a little video. You can see it on my TikTok page. You can also find it on our Instagram page. I did a little mini review for a film she did last year called God is a Bullet, which is more of a thriller than it is a horror film, although there are some very horrific moments in that movie. I just rewatched it again the other night, and I fucking loved that movie. And it did not get a lot of fanfare, did not get great reviews, but I loved it. And a big part of why I loved it was Micah Monroe. She did a movie called The Guest years ago with Adam, what's his name? The guy who does Godzilla. He did
Adam Wingard. Yeah.
It's more of a thriller also, but she's in that. Stills the show. Of course, everyone knows It Follows. She's incredible in that. I would say Micah Monroe is one of my 5 or 6 favorite actors working in Hollywood today. And this might be now my favorite performance of hers because she's so subdued in this movie that it's almost disturbing with how subdued she is. She's so quiet and almost withdrawn in the way she plays Lee Harker that she plays it in a way that she's emotional, but you feel like she doesn't have emotions. She's powerful, yet you feel like she has no power. It's a really weird way of playing a character, but she pulls it off in such a brilliant way that when this movie was over, one of my first thoughts leaving the theater, Patrick, was this is going to fall into another one of those classic cases where the Academy Awards are going to nominate actors for movies that are, that have, fucking nobody's going to go see them and they're art house and, they're going to make $20 million at the box office, but everyone's going to say, oh my God, this is the greatest film of the year. You know my problem with Academy Award movies a lot of times. And they're not going to nominate Micah Monroe for this movie. And that, to me, is a fucking travesty because this is an award-winning performance.
Don't hold your breath on that, Damon. Neon has a lot of play now at the Oscars. I mean, they swept the Oscars, and every year they add more and more movies to nominations. Don't kid yourself. And they're about to have a financial success with Longlegs. If they campaign for her, that's up to them. That's up to them, and it might be up to her. I can't remember, but like it costs money to do that, so the studio really needs to step in and help campaign. If they campaign for her, she could be in the running for sure. It's just a matter of can the engine get behind her, and I hope that Neon, as a thank you to her, campaigns for her. Because there's a couple of performances out there. I'm like, why didn't you guys campaign? Why do you find the money from somebody? But borrow it from somebody. Like, please. Like one was Aubrey Plaza in what was my favorite film that year? I forget what it's called now. Anyway, she was great. Nicolas Cage in Pig. It was a little indie movie. They didn't have the money to campaign for it. It probably is still his finest performance of all time. I'm not even kidding. And he never got a sniff of an award because they couldn't afford a campaign. Neon's about to make a good little chunk of change off of this movie. At minimum, they are going to profit small, like a couple of $1 million. That would be a huge win for an indie movie. take a little slice of that and give thanks to Micah Monroe by campaigning for her, because I do believe if they campaign for her, she will get legitimately nominated for an Academy Award this year.
And she should, by the way. That's like she
Yeah,
absolutely
totally
deserves
should.
it. She's incredible in this movie. Patrick, let's move on to our next category, and that is our MVP award, our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after great character actor Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, when he jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement to stop a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. That, to me, is an MVP performance. So, Patrick, when it comes to Longlegs, who gets your MVP? I know your answer, and I want to tell a little story afterwards because I didn't get to tell this earlier about the inspiration for this movie.
Good point. Thank you. That's a great time to talk about this story. But my MVP is director Oz Perkins. This movie is all about vision. This movie, like I said earlier, he just said, hey, if you have a horror movie and you can make all the rules, then make the craziest rules possible. He made it all fit. A police procedural, an FBI thriller for the on the hunt for a serial killer. How could he possibly be doing these killings? It seems impossible. Somewhere along the line, Oz Perkins said, yeah, it is impossible, so we're going to have to go supernatural. And I'm going to make it make sense to this story. And he adds in these dolls, and he adds in, Satan's shadow. He adds in the glowing red eyes, the flashes of serpents, and all this stuff, like a little bit of like Rose Glass from Love Lies Bleeding earlier this year, like really subjective stuff. And then he sets the tone on his script, and his script almost plays out. This is going to be a weird comparison. Just kind of follow with me here, but the characters in this movie almost remind me of almost like a Wes Anderson movie, where it's like they are painted very specifically. Wes Anderson movies are actually way more varied than people give them credit for. They think they're kind of very specific, and like each one is actually pretty different in the way he approaches them. But they think, oh, it's all Wes Anderson. It's all like symmetrical and all this stuff. This is not that kind of movie, but the specificity on how that characters behave, on how Agent Harker behaves, on how her mom behaves, on how Agent Carter behaves, on how Longlegs behaves. It's so exacting. It's so very specific. And I'm like, well, how could I not give the MVP to this director? Because he had a very, very razor sharp vision, and I think he executed it. Now, it's up to you whether you like it or not. I happen to really have liked it, but I don't think that was an easy magic trick to pull off, and he did.
He did, and and to Osgood Perkins, well, I don't know credit, but just interesting factoid about him. He doesn't watch modern horror.
Yeah.
He said that in a lot of interviews. He's like, I've never seen X or Maxine, and I never will. He's like, I don't watch modern horror, which is fascinating to me because, he's making modern horror films, but he's like, I have no interest in seeing modern horror. I stay to my own lane, and if it happens to cross paths with another film because you're like, ooh, it reminds me of this, or it has a similar DNA as this, that's totally coincidental because I don't watch modern horror films. I thought that was a fascinating comment. So here's my story about Osgood Perkins in this movie. Now, Patrick, and anyone who's a longtime listener of this show knows, one of my greatest annoyances when I watch a horror movie is having to go do research to figure out what the fuck a movie is about afterwards. I don't want you to have to explain it to me. I want to be able to sit down and watch a movie and enjoy it for what it is without having to feel like I need to go read a 2,000 word article online to explain to me what this movie meant or what they were going for. Hello, Men from a couple years ago. Now, the story I'm about to tell does not influence the story of this movie, meaning I didn't need this to understand the movie. But when I read this story, I was blown away and said, holy shit, do I really understand what Osgood Perkins was going for here? So again, you don't need this, but knowing this story totally changed my perspective on Longlegs. So as I mentioned in the intro, Osgood Perkins is the son of Anthony Perkins, the star of Psycho, as everyone knows. What is really disturbing about all this is that Anthony Perkins died in 1992 from complications due to AIDS. And it was later revealed that Anthony Perkins was a closeted gay man for most of his life. He actually went through conversion therapy in the 60s and 70s, and that's when he got married to Osgood's mother, who was an actress and a model named Barry Berenson. At some point during their marriage, Barry Berenson realized Anthony Perkins was gay. But this was at a time during the moral majority of the 80s, the Ronald Reagan era, where coming out as gay was still a very fearful thing, especially in a very public-facing career such as acting. I mean, Rock Hudson was, people didn't find out about Rock Hudson until years later. So she stayed married, and they kept up the facade that Anthony Perkins was a loving husband, a loving father, while secretly he was a gay man living as a gay man in his private life. In 1992, he succumbed to complications from AIDS. It wasn't until after his father died that his mother came clean to their kids, Osgood, and I think he has 2 siblings, and said, your father was a gay man, he died of AIDS, and that's how he lived his life. And Osgood was shocked and blown away. He had no idea. And the idea that inspired him for this movie is that parents lie to their children out of love. He actually said he tried to inject some of this into the movie Gretel and Hansel he did a few years ago. He got the idea afterwards. He's like, I don't know how I didn't inject more of this into that movie. I had the idea of a parent lying to their kids, but I didn't go that deep with it. He put it in this movie, and when you read that, that's what this story is ultimately about. It's about Ruth Harker lying to her daughter for basically her entire life from the time she's 9 years old to protect her. It's a lie of love. And he understood. Now, were there ill feelings because he didn't really know his dad? Yeah, of course. And that's where he said, just like, I'm sure Lee Harker would have liked to known her mother is basically killing people her entire life. She's been carrying out a serial killer's actions, which hurts her. But she also understands why her mother did it, because she was protecting her. And that's what Osgood Perkins' mother was doing for him, was trying to protect him from the harm that comes from that stigma at that time. And so that's why she did it. She lied to him out of love, and he didn't really find out about his father until after his death in 1992, I believe, is when he died. Sadly, also, to throw this out there, which is something I had no idea about, Osgood Perkins lost his mother in 2001. She was on one of the planes that flew into the World Trade Center in 2001, which I was blown away when I heard that. I had never heard that before. Barry Berenson died in the plane that crashed into the North Tower in the World Trade Center bombings, in the World Trade Center tragedy of 9/11. Had no idea. But that's where the inspiration for the story came. Now, as I said, you don't need to know that to like or dislike this movie. But when I heard that story of how his mother lied to him basically his entire life up until his dad's death to protect him and to protect his dad's legacy, I was like, holy shit, do I now see the correlation between Ruth Harker and Lee Harker in this movie.
When you're a writer, I think screenwriting, novels, creative writing, I think, and at least from my personal experience, having written scripts too, I think you have to start with a kernel of truth. That's kind of like a good jumping off point. And for Oz Perkins, it was this idea that like, oh, well, my mom did this to protect us. Oh, at what lengths could a parent go to protect their children? What if they were trying to protect them from like Satan? Like literally, it was just the jump was that. It was like, my mom did this to protect us. That was probably dark for her. So what's it like if we just keep exploring just that theme? Theme is super important to a great story. This story has that theme. I mean, I believe you've read my script, They Will Burn. It's my werewolf script. I'm pretty sure you've read that.
I have.
It's the script I'm most proud of everything I've ever written. That is 100% kernels of my life, exaggerated into other crazy things that are way, 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 they have nothing to do with my life. But the things, the fire that lit all of that was things that came from my real life. and then it turns into the script I'm most proud of. And maybe down the line I'll explain to you where that script actually ended up. But for Oz to go, yeah, I think I see something in that, and just letting that be the jumping off point turned into Longlegs, right? And it's the whole thing isn't about his dad. It's really not, but it's just like that guiding light of what will a parent do, how far will they go to protect their child, eventually morphed into Longlegs. And I love that. And that's MVP shit.
And that's why I said that, again, you don't need to know that story to enjoy or I don't want you to make a judgment of this movie based upon that. But when I heard that story, I was blown away. I was just like, wow, like what an incredible story, a personal story to then inject into a movie, because it really does make sense. It makes total sense of why Lee Harker's mother did what she did, considering what Osgood Perkins' mother did for him. It's just, he said a parent lying out of love, because you don't want your parents to lie. None of us want our parents to lie to us. Some parents lie to you about who their parents are. Like, he's not really your dad. He's not really your, whatever. Like, those things, like, not to get too personal, but like, I had questions years later, like, was my dad actually my dad? Because I learned some things later in life that I'm, not 100, and at this point, my dad's many years dead, so I have no way to know for sure, but like, I had questions, and I have no way to prove it, but I had questions. That fucks with you. It really does. And so for him to inject that part of his personal life, especially something so painful as the loss of his father, I mean, that to me was just like, again, even if I hated this movie, I would say, wow, what an incredible way to inject yourself into the story. So yeah, MVP.
MVP.
For me, my MVP is Neon, the studio behind Longlegs. Now, go back and listen to our episode about Immaculate, and I think I also named Neon the MVP for that movie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct.
I'm doing it again here only because I want to continue to, just continue full on filleting them for what they're doing lately.
They appreciate your service.
We also credited the marketing department for Immaculate. Immaculate had a great marketing behind it, and when that movie came out. And here we are again. So again, marketing department of Neon, you all deserve raises. I don't know what you're making, but you all deserve raises, for one. For two, I know, and I want to just rehash what I said during the Immaculate podcast, but again, I'm looking at their filmography here, and it is an unbelievable lineup. I mean, this year, again, we had Immaculate, Bratz, which is a movie that's getting a lot of attention, Babes, which is a comedy that got a lot of attention this year. But then you go back a little further, and you're getting Anatomy of a Fall, which was an Oscar-winning movie, Infinity Pool, which is a movie you and I loved when it came out. Triangle of Sadness, that was a very loved movie. You got Spencer, you got Titane, which was a big movie. Pig, of course, was a movie you and I were all over and absolutely loved. The Lodge, which is another horror movie that was pretty incredible. A good one. Parasite, which of course won every award ever when it came out in 2019. Honeyland, Apollo 11, going back, some other horror movies they have in there. I, Tonya, which of course is a big movie with Margot Robbie when that came out. This is a studio that is just consistently putting out good films. And again, I think the comparison is fair to say this is very much like A24, where A24 was, a lot of horror films, but then you kind of mix in the other films. Look at what they have coming up, because for the rest of this year, you have Cuckoo, which is coming out in just a few weeks, which you and I are, another one that you and I are excited about. That is Hunter Schafer, one of my favorites, Dan Stevens. I'm super excited about that one. And then you have Anora, which was the Palme d'Or winner for the Cannes Film Festival. Did you see did they play the trailer for Anora?
They did, yeah. Yep.
Mikey Madison, who a lot of fans will remember from Scream 5 and also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That is the movie that won Cannes this year. The Palme d'Or is the big fucking, the grand prize, the best Oscar, so to speak, at the Cannes Film Festival. Anora was the one that won it. It's a drama comedy is what it's being billed as. It comes out in October, and I saw the trailer. I can't wait to see the movie in theaters. That's coming out later this year. That's 100% going to be an Oscar film. And then next year in February, The Monkey, which is a Stephen King adaptation by Osgood Perkins. It's his next movie. So we already have like just the rest of this year going into next year. We have 3 movies that I'm like way anticipating seeing. So Neon, you're fucking killing it, guys. Whoever's running the show over there, I'm not sitting out. Like, I'm not trying to get a job. Give me a call if you want to give me a job. They're fucking killing it over there, man. And so this is another example. Just like I said with Immaculate, I'll say it again now with Longlegs. Neon, keep up the great work because you are fucking killing it right now.
Yes, they are.
No, nothing more than that. You don't have any more love for Neon, Patrick? What's going on?
Damon, we've given them this MVP twice already. I can't belabor the point anymore.
That's true. Now our next category is a special category. Because it's a category that we actually named after one of the stars of Longlegs.
One testicle!
Named after the great Nicolas Cage in Prisoners of Ghostland when he just goes full Nick Cage and yells one testicle. This is our one testicle overacting award. And Patrick, for Longlegs, there's only one answer to this question.
There could only be one answer to the one testicle award, and that is the man who birthed it himself, Nicolas Cage. Now, I want to make a caveat for this one because typically we go, "Oh man, somebody was really going over the top." Well, yeah, Nicolas Cage can go over the top, but can you match his freak? In Longlegs, he goes over the top. But when I tell you he goes over the top and it completely works, it does. So I could have easily given him the Best Performance Award, and I would have been happy with it, and you would have chosen Micah Monroe, and we would have been able to talk about them both. But Nicolas Cage brings that one testicle energy to this role of Longlegs. It is over the top. It is wild, and he achieved it perfectly. He perfectly landed a one testicle performance. So this is not a knock. This is not him saying it was too much, me saying it was too much, none of that stuff. I'm saying he did a one testicle award worthy performance, and it fit very perfectly into this movie. Now, Osgood Perkins did say, he goes, I gave him leeway. I said, hey, if you want to change stuff, if you want to improvise, I want to be open to that. Nicolas Cage said, nope, I'm sticking to the words. But I do want to hone this character with you. I do want to hone what Longlegs looks like, the way he sounds, the way he says these words. I'm happy to say them, but I want to work on how he says them. So you're getting the Nicolas Cage one testicle all over this movie. And once you see it, believe me, and boy, was my crowd reacting to the Nicolas Cage one testicle moves. Like they were like, hell yeah, that's what we were here for. Get your freak on. And he was doing it. And it's brilliant, and it's creepy, and it's crazy. And tell me this, Damon, don't you think the way he's modeled, I don't want to give away too much of how he looks, and it's not that crazy anyway, but it's just he's incredibly creepy looking. I was like, is he totally doing, especially with the way he's dressed and everything, I was like, is he doing Tiny Tim?
A little bit, I could see that. I could see a little bit of that in there. I don't really know. I think he was just doing Nick Cage. I think this was just Nick Cage being Nick Cage.
But you got to admit, it was one testicle. You got to admit.
So when we say one testicle, we kind of joke, and it's an overacting award when you just fucking go for it. And again, overacting can work. Sometimes it's just hilarious, and it's a little too much, like one testicle shouting it and sound like you're going through puberty at the time, like Nick Cage did in Prisoners of Ghostland, is really funny. But Nick Cage is one of my favorite actors because he always goes for it. Now, does it always work? No, it doesn't. And I have a lot of my favorite actors who I will say go for it sometimes, and what they pull off, you're kind of like, yeah, that didn't quite work. I've told this story on the show before, not to hammer the nail, but there are actors who flat out say, I won't do comedy because I don't have the timing to do comedy. There are actors that won't do horror because I can't act scared. They're honest enough with themselves to say, I can't pull this off. Nick Cage is just like, give it to me and I'm going to make it my own. And he is all over the fucking map in this movie. There's one scene where he's in the car and he just starts screaming about mommy and daddy, and it's just fucking manic. And you're like, holy shit, did he get a hold of the cocaine budget on Maxine? What's going on here? He's all over the place. But when we say one testicle, we do mean overacting. But this movie isn't what it is without Nick Cage being one testicle. I don't want to go back. Like we do our Aliens review, go back to Alien. I don't think we had a one testicle award right there. But I think there is a segment of people who would say, as manic as Bill Paxton was when he's so over the top with his like, game over, man, game over. Some people say it gets a little goofy. To me, that's my favorite. One of my favorite Bill Paxton movies of all time. I love the late, great Bill Paxton, one of my favorite actors of all time. He goes for it in that movie. Is it a little goofy? Is it a little over the top? Sure, but that's how you get that character of Hudson. It doesn't work if he comes out and just goes, game over, man. It's game over. He's just, subdued. Yeah. It doesn't work. Nick Cage needs to go full Nick Cage and go full one testicle to make Longlegs work.
Oh, and does it work? I love it. And I told you there was some Nick Cage faithful in the audience. They ate every minute of him up anytime he was on screen. And they use him effectively. They don't overuse him. They use him when they need to use him. It's Michael Monroe's movie, and he kind of shows up a few times. But when they do, they're incredibly impactful. They're incredibly creepy, and they are 100% Nick Cage certified one testicle, and it works. I'm telling you, it really does work.
What is your favorite? I'm putting you on the spot here. Not Pig, and not Longlegs, because that's the one we're reviewing right now. What is your other favorite Nicolas Cage performance?
I like Con Air a lot, but I also just love the movie. Like, it's one of those movies I fucking love Con Air. So I'd probably go with that.
See, now here's where I differentiate with Con Air, because I think the Nicolas Cage performance in that movie is why am I fucking, I just drew.
I have my right answer. Continue, but I know what my answer is. Go ahead.
But why am I not thinking of his name? Who plays Cyrus the Virus?
Malkovich, yeah.
No, John Malkovich. John Malkovich is Nicolas Cage in that movie. He does the full. Yeah. He goes one testicle in a great way in Con Air. So it's almost like Nicolas Cage handed him baton for one movie and says, yes, Malkovich, you go be Nick Cage for one movie. So I love Con Air. That's one of my all-time favorite movies. Yeah. But I actually think Malkovich is more Cage in that movie than Nick Cage.
You're right. Totally. But I have my actual answer, and I'm curious if yours is the same. But my actual answer, and it's a straight comedy performance, is Raising Arizona. That's by absolute. It's one of my favorite movies ever. Period. But his performance is incredible.
That was my answer. Raising Arizona.
There you go.
Yeah, I crack up at that movie. It is the Coen brothers, one of their best, if not their best. And I make my girlfriend laugh every single time because we have our dogs and we're obsessed with our dogs. And like my girlfriend will occasionally get like nuzzling with our dogs and she'll just go, I love them so much, honey. And I always do the Holly Hunter line where she's like, I love them so much. I know you do, honey. She's crying in the car. He goes, I know you do, honey. And then that one line he says when she finds out she can't have babies, and he goes, the doctor told her insides were a rocky place where my seed could find no purchase.
That's incredible. It is what a like lightning in a bottle role. Like he was a young guy and he hit it. He hit the comedic timing and the earnestness of the character all really. He's a really great actor. I think Oz called him a finely tuned instrument, and he was like, well, of course he is. He goes, you think I directed Nick Cage? I didn't. Like, we talked about it. We had our conversations. We had our phone calls. We got on set, and he did his work. He's a finely tuned instrument. And I couldn't believe it more. I couldn't agree with that more. And I just had to put the one testicle award in here because it's truly his award. No one does it better. And if I didn't give him the one testicle award for Longlegs, it would have been a travesty.
Absolutely. And also, I want to just, not to sit here and just rattle off Nick Cage movies. Of course, he won an Oscar for Leaving Las Vegas, which is an incredible movie. And I actually rewatched that last year for the first time in several years. I was like, God damn, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
But I love him in Face Off. I love actually another
Yep.
movie, a De Palma movie that I actually like, Snake Eyes. That's a De Palma movie that doesn't get talked about very much. I actually really like Snake Eyes. There's not much that Nick Cage has been in that I don't like, honestly. And did I ever tell you I met Nick Cage once in Vegas? I met him at a
I
met
think
him
you
at a fight,
did.
a UFC fight. I met him years ago. He was at a UFC fight. And
Yeah.
I met him for like 2 minutes. But yeah, I'm a big Nick Cage fan. And I listen. There's a new movie actually in Shudder now called Arcadian. I haven't watched it
Yeah, I
yet,
have
but
to
I want
watch
to
it.
check.
Yeah.
I want to check it out. But even Prisoners of Ghostland, which we reviewed, and we just said this movie is fucking insane. I loved it because of Nick Cage. Nick Cage is the man. I love Nick Cage. I am a Nick Cage fan.
And I think I told you too, speaking of anecdotes, like he and I worked in the same building together for like a week. Didn't I tell you that?
I don't think so. I don't think you told me that story.
I was working on Air Buddies from the Air Bud franchise, and we were doing like ADR work, and I was the cameraman for all the ADR work, and he was in another booth doing ADR work. So every day I'd come out on breaks, and there'd go Nicolas Cage, like stomping through the building. I'm like, that's fucking Nick Cage. We're working in the same building on movies. We're basically the same dude.
How did you not just befriend Nick Cage in that moment? Be like, can I come over? Can we play samurai swords? Can we do something?
Yeah, I should have. I should have been more forward at the time. I was young in my career. I didn't want to overstep my bounds.
Yeah, that was like when the one time I met Bill Paxton, I was just like, I walked up and I was like, hey man, I'm a huge fan. I love your work. I love everything you do. I won't sit here and name your entire IMDb page, but I just want to say how much your films have meant to me. He shook my hand, said, thank you so much, asked me my name, asked me where I was from. We talked for 5 minutes, and I walked away. And I've always said on this show, one of my favorite moments ever, because sadly, of course, Bill Paxton died. And I'm just so glad I was scared to death walking up to Bill Paxton, like, it's Bill Paxton. He's probably going to be like, fuck off, dude. He was the nicest guy in the world, but I had to tell him how much, because he was like one of my top 5 favorite actors working in Hollywood. And so, yeah, dude, you should have done it. You should have been like, Nick Cage,
It's
I
all
fucking love
good.
you.
We'll meet again. He'll be in my horror movie. I'll have him star in They Will Burn. It'll work out.
Yeah, so let's move on to our next category, which is best scare. Now, even though I kind of already answered my question later about is it scary, I didn't find this movie truly scary, but there were a couple of good moments, and there were definitely a couple of moments in my theater where people were fucking jumping out of their seats. So, Patrick, what was your best scare?
There were definitely some intentional scares, like very intentional scares in this movie, and then there's the level of creep and all that good stuff. But I got to tell you, I chose my best scare based on the dude sitting next to me. I told you, this guy maybe has never seen a horror movie in his life. I knew I could feel the scares coming. I got a rhythm for it, as many of our listeners probably do at this point, because you watch 100 horror movies a year. You tend to get the timing down. You tend to know when it's going to happen. So I was more leaning in. I was very intrigued by the story and the procedure of it all. This guy might have shat himself. I remember at one point he jumped so hard it rocked the whole row of seats. The whole row got rocked by him jumping, and so I'm gonna make that my best scare in tribute to this guy who was, I think, scared shitless, literally, in this instance. And that is, they discover the doll in the barn. They pry it open. This great, like, kind of drawn out scene where they pry it open and they open the box, and inside you're like, there's a doll. What the fuck? And they sit it up, and it's got like human like hair, but it's got the hair sort of withering away and missing. It looks creepy as fuck. And then out of nowhere, I'm like, well, the eyes are going to open, because that's going to happen right now. The eyes shoot open, and this guy might have blown 3 rows back. He was so fucking scared. So I give my best scare to the doll's eyes opening in that scene.
That definitely got people in my theater too. There was more than a couple like audible gasps in that moment. The 2 scares that got me closest to where I was like, oh shit, like it did catch me off guard. One, but this isn't my favorite. The one early is when the FBI agent gets shot at the door. That got me just because it was so sudden. He's just like, could you feel this? He just gets blown away. You're like, oh shit. Like, right, that's like 5 minutes into the movie. You're like, what the fuck? So that's right out of the gate. But the one that actually got me the most, and it also had to do with the score and the music, because with the way they play it, man. So when Lee gets the trunk back to her apartment and she starts filing through the Polaroid pictures, and she comes to Longlegs' picture where she took a Polaroid of him back in 1974. She sees it, and the flash of like the memory comes back to her, and you see a flash of Longlegs, you see a flash of her mother, blood, all this shit, and it just scream, and there's like a loud, audible like scream in the score. That fucking freaked me in that moment. I was like, oh shit, very jarring. I was like, oh goddamn. That was the one that actually got me like in the theater the first time, where I was like, where it jolted me a little bit, where I was like, oh shit.
Yeah. No, I think I might have had that on my list of scares too. It was like when she sees the photo, like things just go blank, and you're like, whoa, okay. Like there's a couple of very constructed jump scares in this movie that'll get you.
Yeah, they do a couple of those. Like I said, it's not a lot, but they do a couple. Patrick, let's move on to our next category, which is best gore. Now, to be fair, this isn't an overly gory movie. It doesn't really need to be, but what was your best gore in Longlegs?
Not an overly gory movie, but when it's time to be gory, it could be highly disturbing if somebody did not prepare themselves for this movie. In the scene where Harker and Longlegs have their actual face to face for the very first time when he's locked up, he says what he says, and it's not really enough. And then he proclaims his loyalty to Satan and proceeds to smash his face on the interrogation table, not once, not twice, maybe 3-4 times. And his face is sort of built up. It looks like he's had a lot of plastic surgery, is really what it looks like. And so his face basically just breaks off because it's so artificial. And what's left is sort of, it almost looks like a shotgun wound is what it really looks like. It's just like, oh my God. Like his nose, his cheekbones, they have fallen away from his face, and blood is just pouring out of this man's head. It's incredibly gory and disturbing, and I was like, well, that to me is the no-brainer for best gore.
Yeah, that was super gory, and all you can see at the very end is almost like his nasal cavity and just blood and gush. It was pretty nasty. That's honestly the answer for best gore. That's really the answer. But I'll throw out one more that I enjoyed, and it's not really gory. It's more just disgusting. Is when they go to the house where they discover the murders, and they said this family was supposed to be in Disneyland, so they've been gone for people didn't suspect them being missing, so they're a month dead, like they've been dead for a month. And so they go into the bedroom where the father had killed the entire family, and they're laying under blankets in the bed, and the forensic examiner, the coroner, whatever you want to call it, is like, are you sure you want to see this? And Carter's like, yeah, and he's like, Harker, you can handle it, right? And she kind of nods, and they pull back the cover, and it's just this totally decomposed body with maggots crawling all over it. So it's not really gory as much as it's very, not to belabor the point of comparing it to another movie, but in the scene when they pull back the cover on the one guy in his house, and he's been kept alive by John Doe for a year, and he's got needles all covered in him. He looks like a skeleton covered in skin. These are basically, it's all gore and guts and disgustingness of them being dead, laying in their own muck for a month dead. There's maggots and the decomposed skin, and it's rather disgusting.
Yeah, the blackish, muddy, slimy skin and covered in maggots. It felt very real, like they did some good study on some forensic photos, and you're just like, that's probably closer to reality than you want to think.
Yeah,
so it's a very, very disturbing scene.
The maggots get me every time. Maggots are pretty disgusting. So if maggots are around, it's not going to be a good time.
And they probably went easy on the maggots too. Truth be told, it's probably way worse normally.
Yeah. Next category, Patrick: remake, sequel, or leave it alone. Obviously, it's pretty self-explanatory category, which is basically we look at whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, do you want to remake it? Do you want to sequelize it? Or do you want to just leave it alone? When it comes to Longlegs, remake, sequel, leave it alone.
I bet if you ask Osgood Perkins, he goes, "We're leaving this alone. We don't sequelize this. We don't do this. We don't mess around with this." But he accidentally made something that can be very, very much sequelized. The idea that Satan can put himself into these metal balls, in these dolls, Like it's a race against the clock. You can do it. Now the question is, should you do it? And my answer is no, you shouldn't. I do think that this is a great standalone movie. This, I mean, yes, Silence of the Lambs has remakes. It is a remake. Basically, it's basically a remake of Manhunter, Michael Mann's Manhunter. It's basically a remake of that.
No, that's
Well, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I know
Red Dragon is actually the remake of Manhunter.
it's a remake of Manhunter. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. But I guess my point is that even Silence of the Lambs has a universe to it. This doesn't need that. It's a very interesting, very, very left field story. So you couldn't even sequelize it without Oz Perkins, without it missing some of what makes it Longlegs, which is Oz Perkins' brain and how he thinks it all should kind of click together. And I highly, highly doubt he's even remotely interested in doing a sequel to this.
So I'll say leave it alone because I'm 99.9% sure that's what's going to happen. I don't think there's ever going to be a sequel to this, and I don't think Osgood Perkins would be interested in doing a sequel to this. But if you allow me one little rewrite of The Living Dead to just close the book on Longlegs, the very end of the movie is Agent Harker kills Carter, kills her mom, and pulls Ruby away from the doll that looks just like her because she's very much under its influence. She's almost obsessed with the doll, sitting there as her family's just dying around her, and she doesn't look like she could give a shit. She pulls her away from the doll, and she points her gun at the doll, just like her mother pointed the shotgun at her doll, killed it, and it kind of freed her from the connection to the entity, so to speak, living inside the doll. She pulls the trigger of the gun doesn't go off. She pulls like 2 or 3 times, no bullets come out, and she just ends. The movie ends with her staring at Ruby's life-size doll with Ruby kind of tucked behind her, and that's literally how it ends. My rewrite of Living Dead, if you really want to put a cap on this, would have just been pulling the trigger and the bullet goes off and you blow away the doll, which would end the connection between Ruby and the doll, much like it ended the connection between Harker and her doll. The fact that you left it with no bullet and nothing happens leads me to think, well, they could do a sequel where Harker is still alive and now Ruby is carrying out her mother's role. Like she's the new Ruth Harker, where she's the entryway into the devil getting into these homes. A young girl goes there dressed as a nun, whatever. So I was like, why? Again, it's just a minor thing, just to put just to kind of close the door. If you shoot that doll, it's done. Story over. The fact that you didn't shoot the doll, but the movie ends, kind of leaves that. And maybe that's what Osgood Perkins is doing, is just like the hint of like this continues. Even though he'll never sequelize it, it's his way of being like, I'm going to fuck with you a little bit because it really isn't over. This is never over because the devil never goes away. I think that's what he was going for.
Oh, yeah.
And I get it. But for me personally, like that's the one little tweak. Just to end it, have her shoot the doll and then just fade to black. That would be my little thing.
I would keep Osgood Perkins ending because the idea that like, nope, the devil's going to get you one way or another. Like he's going to get you. I really like that. And it added to the oddness of the whole thing. Cause like time starts to really slow down. Like it starts to become slow motion as you see her like just uselessly pulling at the trigger and it's clicking and you're like, ooh, that feels kind of hopeless in this moment. And then we're going to just take it right away from you. Yep. It's over. You're not going to know what's happening next, because the devil will always be around. And I believe there's even a flash, like as it goes black, the flash is you do see the outline of the Baphomet type figure, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't really remember.
I can't quite remember, or maybe it was like in the very next image or something before it goes to the credits. But basically he's just saying the devil's going to get you. And I like that. I really like stuff like that and it's pretty nihilistic. It's kind of a nihilistic ending where you're just like, wait a minute, we're not going to wrap this up in a nice little bow. No, we're not. Yeah, you're going to be punished. I like that. I very much like the nihilistic endings.
And I appreciate that, Osgood, if you read Osgood Perkins' interviews about this movie, he talks very openly about like people like to talk about Satan, but they don't actually like the real atrocities being carried out throughout history and religion are people carrying things out in the name of God. he's like, the Crusades were carried out in the name of God. No one carried out in the name of Satan. It's like, if you really think about it, like a lot of the atrocities carried out throughout history are people who are saying they're doing it in the name of God. Now, I'm not saying they're right in doing it. I'm just saying like they believe that's their purpose, is doing it in the name of God. Very few times in history have things been carried out in the name of Satan. And so that's why he did it for this movie, because he's like, everyone likes talking about Satan being evil, but really, the real fucking crazy, horrible things that have been carried out are in the name of God. So let's do a movie where we actually are carrying out things in the name of Satan. And so he kind of juxtaposed a little bit because, really, that's the truth. Everyone's like, oh, Satan's evil. But the real atrocities, things like that are always people thinking, I'm carrying out God's will. Doesn't mean they are. I'm just saying that's what they're saying they are. And so, I thought it was a cool little twist that he put on that.
Why not be like, what does it look like when someone carries out evil in the name of Satan? Looks fucked up, looks scary, don't like it.
Looks like Nick Cage. Run, motherfucker, run. Can we survive this horror film, Patrick? Our next category, of course, this is where you and I inject ourselves in this movie. Now, I have no idea where the fuck. I know where you're fitting in this movie because you got kids. You don't have a daughter, but you got kids. I don't. So I guess I kind of have to put myself in the Harker position in this movie because I don't have kids. I don't have a family. So are you and I surviving this movie? Are we making it out of here alive?
I think we're actually in pretty good shape, or at least I am, because A, I don't have a daughter, and the daughters are part of the pattern. B, my kids' birthdays aren't on the 14th, so I'm also good there too. So truth be told, even though I'm a dad, and if you leave a mess in a certain part of the house, I certainly start acting like Longlegs or somebody under the power of Satan's spell. But no, indeed, I don't think that's going to happen in this instance. So let's just pretend like you and I are a couple of FBI agents, and our partner or our one of our colleagues, Agent Harker, goes, well, I'm kind of psychic. And you and I are going to pass out from our eyes rolling back into our head so far, and we're going to fall over on the ground and go, okay, you're psychic. And no, I'm psychic, and I also think that maybe this might even be the devil. Gotcha. We're going to go over here, and we're going to go look at these hackers that did this one thing. You have fun with that, okay, Agent Harker? You seem like a nice person. Wish you all the best. But I think you and I wouldn't buy into this, much like Agent Carter, by the way, who did not buy into this shit. He was like, no, it's a guy. It's a guy. Quit acting like Satan's part of this. That ain't happening. That might get us tripped up in this movie.
Yeah, no, I you're absolutely right. And I think in that way we would make it because, listen, the way we don't make it, though, is if we're Browning, we just drive her to the house and we get shot by her mom. Browning didn't do anything wrong. She wasn't a disbeliever or a believer. She was just there and she got shot and killed. And then the agent at the beginning who just literally knocked on the fucking front door and got blown away. Even though, of course she's saying, like, this is the house, call for backup. No one in their right mind would be like, oh, sure, the killer's in this house. Like, they're just being told to go door to door to see if anyone has information.
That brings up a good point. Now, let's pretend we're the psychic partners alongside Agent Harker, and we're doing our little test run to go see if we can find some killers. We have a hunch on it, right? That guy had an arrogance to him. It was very clear. It was very Silence of the Lambs. And I think that was actually intentional. He was like trying to kind of guide us in that direction where it's like, yeah, these agents think they're better than her. And that's what Clarice went through with her time at the FBI. I'm not that kind of guy. And my mentality in that moment too, before he even got his brains blown out, I was just like, hey, you know what? I like what Agent Patrick would be like. I'd be like, actually, Harker, I think you should knock at the door because I think seeing your face, look at me. I look like Charlie Manson. Yeah, I don't think they want to see me. So I think you're right. I think you should go to the door and I'll hang back. And then, if I need to back you up, I'll back you up. So even in that instance, I think I'm surviving.
Yeah. And can I don't want to go really off on a tangent here, but I do want to bring this up. Because I had this thought watching the movie the second time and reading the interviews with Osgood Perkins talking about this movie and Seven and Silence of the Lambs. and I know this is really off topic, but I want to get your take on this, Patrick. Do you realize how hard it is to write a really, truly compelling detective story? And what I mean by that is a detective story where you're solving a crime. And I'm
Right.
not talking about just the run of the mill, like Law and Order, it was the wife. We always knew it was the wife. We just have to prove it's the wife kind of thing. I'm talking about a real deep down mystery. Because I was thinking about this with this movie. To solve this crime, really it comes down to repressed memories for Lee that her mother hid from her. She really didn't figure anything out. Like, she really just, like, she did, like, in reality, she didn't figure anything out. Longlegs came to her, gave her the code to figure out what he was writing, and that led her in the direction of going to the camera farm, and then obviously remembering what her mother told her. Really, she didn't truly detect much of anything. And I thought about this. Seven, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. Andrew Kevin Walker, who incredibly wrote that movie, not trying to take anything away from him. Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman don't solve shit in that movie. The only way they find John Doe in that movie, sorry, spoilers 20 years after the fact, is that they do the whole search on a library card. They do the FBI search to people who get flagged for reading and taking out certain books. And they ran it through a database, and they came up and spit out a bunch of names. The one name they went to see was John Doe. They didn't detect anything. They didn't figure it out. They just had this list. Like, that's like the convenient way of figuring it out. And then when John Doe turns himself in, he literally shows up at the police station and says, "You've been looking for me." Silence of the Lambs. Clarice doesn't really figure out anything that Lecter didn't tell her to. She didn't figure out that James Gumb, he covets. What does he covet? We covet what we see on every day. She figures out that he knew her, Frederica Bimmel, his first victim, in the movie, but that's all because Lecter told her that. She didn't figure it out. Lecter told her that. The reason I'm bringing this up, the way I'm going about this, is I want you to appreciate the first season of True Detective. Nick Pizzolatto wrote a really deep, like, puzzle piece, fucking giant puzzle of a story. And Matthew McConaughey's character, Rust Cole, figures it all out. The thread, he pulls at every single thread, and he's the one who ultimately figures it out. Marty Hart does a little bit in the very end with the whole greenhouse thing where they figure out the green-eared spaghetti monster for people who've seen True Detective Season 1. But really, it's all Rust Cole. And Rust Cole actually solves the crime. He actually does the detecting to figure out all the connections between the killings, the murder, everything. He figures it out.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that with this movie. I'm not by the way, I'm not saying all this to say that Andrew Kevin Walker didn't write a great script and that Ted Talley didn't write a great script for Silence of the Lambs, and of course Osgood. I'm not knocking any of them. Silence of the Lambs, one of the best movies ever made. Seven, one of my favorite movies of all time, one of the best movies ever made. Longlegs was a pretty damn good movie. But it all proved a point to me, which is it is really fucking hard to write a truly good detective story where you figure out the crime.
It's really tough. It's really tough. And it's often the story is like, it was right under my nose and I didn't see it. That's almost the prevailing theme in any detective movie or even detective show sometimes, was it's like, I wasn't looking because I literally looked past it. Like my eyes went past what I was supposed to see. It was right under my nose the whole time. But here's where I credit Oz Perkins, is that I didn't figure this stuff out. I was like, like I said earlier, I just go, how in the hell are we going to get to the end? Like, how is this going to wrap itself up? It's crazy. To wrap it up and not be like, well, it was right under her nose. It was under her floorboards. I mean, it was literally under the house that she was living in. But to do it in a way that I would have never guessed and hadn't seen before, that's my credit to Oz Perkins and company, to just go, wow, you know what? Now I have a new police procedural that I've never seen before.
Yeah, it's so hard to do it. It's funny. I also had this thought watching. I rewatched Scream 4 recently, which I love. Scream, all this, my love of the Scream movies. But Gail Weathers, Courtney Cox has a great line talking to Dewey in that movie. She says, he's kind of cutting her out of the investigation. She says, Dewey, I helped solve 3 of these things. I was like, Gail, you didn't solve shit. You didn't figure out anything in any of those movies. It wasn't until they unmasked themselves that you figured it out. You didn't know that Billy Loomis's mother was Billy Loomis's mother until it was already too late. She's like, I helped solve 3. You didn't solve shit, Gail. You were there when it got solved, but you didn't solve anything. So I'm just pointing out the true difficulty of writing a really masterful detective story where the detective actually solves the crime. Because it's not easy. I'm just pointing to the mastery of True Detective Season 1 to say that's a rare instance, because if you look at a lot of these great detective stories, the detectives really don't detect. Like, they detect, but they don't figure it out. And even in this one, like, I agree, like, it's really well plotted the way he does it, but really, Lee doesn't figure it out. Clarice Starling really didn't figure it out. Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman really didn't figure it out. I'm just saying.
But you know why I like Osgood Perkins' version of that is that they couldn't figure it out. There was those other movies you might be like, wow, like they were just not as good at detecting as they thought they were. In this instance, she was never going to be able to do it because she was literally under the spell of Satan.
Yeah.
When you're under the spell of Satan, that's it. So that's Osgood Perkins saying, hey, why don't we just make the rules however the fuck we want to make them?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's smart. It's smart that he did that. Because otherwise you do end up with, I wouldn't say a tired trope, but a more typical ending was, it was under my nose the whole time. How did I not see that coming? And this movie even still has that with the birthday issue. But the reason she actually didn't see it coming is because she was literally under the spell of Satan. There's no way she could have seen it coming. He was never going to allow it. So I'm like, oh, cool. He actually makes a rule space inside his world that makes it make sense.
It does. It really does. But I'm pointing out the difficulty, man. It is hard to write a good detective story, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, so he was probably agreeing with you, and he was like, cool, yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just enter the supernatural so it'll make more sense.
Yeah, and when that happened in the movie, when the whole psyche thing started at the very beginning, I was like, oh, cool. This isn't just like a carbon copy of Silence of the Lambs. They're doing something totally different, introducing a fucking psychic in the movie. And then, of course, the whole, the devil influence and everything. I was like, okay, this is totally different. Yes, it's still technically an FBI serial killer story, but it's so much more than that. And I appreciate that, like, it didn't just fall. That's why I said I don't want the comparisons to Silence of the Lambs, because it's not really fair. It's not really a fair comparison. So, Patrick, do you want to introduce our next category, which I found is really hilarious? Our Nepo baby discussion that started a few episodes ago with the Watchers now continues now. Would you like to introduce and talk about this category real quick?
I couldn't help myself because I was like, this year we are getting a few Nepo baby directors, Osgood Perkins being among them, Ishana Shyamalan with The Watchers, and then actually Caitlin Cronenberg has a movie coming out. She's the daughter of David Cronenberg, but I haven't seen Inhumane yet. Or is it Humane? It's Humane. I haven't seen Humane yet, and I think people have seen it in festivals, and I don't think it's on demand yet. So we can't fairly grade her. So Brandon Cronenberg, who did Infinity Pool and Possessor, we're going to grade him in her place. And later on, maybe at the end of the year, we'll revisit the Nepo baby director category for our year end, because we'll have her movie as well. So Damon, between Ishana Shyamalan, Osgood Perkins. By the way, Osgood Perkins, like, there's not a non-famous person in his family. If you read his history, it's not just his dad and mom, like cousins, aunts, uncles. The man was born to Hollywood, but a talented director nonetheless. I feel the same about Brandon Cronenberg, and I feel the same about Ishana Shyamalan. They are all talented, but they're Nepos indeed. So please, Damon, who's your favorite?
Of the 3 you mentioned, I would have to say, and again, it's a smaller body of work, but I just think the films I've seen I've liked really, really a lot. And I would say Brandon Cronenberg would be my number one. I really enjoyed Blackcoat's Daughter. I hope we do get to review that at one point because that was my introduction to Osgood Perkins, and I really did enjoy that movie. The Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, I think, was the second movie. I watched it on Netflix. It's all right. It's not my favorite. It's whatever. And I have not seen Gretel and Hansel, so I can't speak to that film. But obviously, I did enjoy Longlegs. I don't know that it'll be in my numbered 1, 2, or 3 slot at the end of the year. I can't rank it yet, but I didn't feel the same way about Longlegs that, like I said, maybe I did about Late Night with the Devil, where I was like, this is number one for me right now. It's going to have to, like, Talk to Me was last year. I was like, it's going to take something to knock it out of the number one spot. I don't feel quite that strongly about Longlegs. So I would say Brandon Cronenberg because Possessor is really good. I really enjoyed that movie, and I was blown away by how much I enjoyed Infinity Pool. That was like the opposite of Longlegs and Maxine. I went to that movie thinking this is gonna be a fucking weird art house, fucking weird men movie, and I'm gonna walk out being confused. Walked out and I was like, this is brilliant. I loved it, and we gave it a glowing review. So Brandon Cronenberg, you get my Nepo Baby Award.
I like that. I'm sure he likes it too. Yeah, I'm sure they don't find this category insulting at all. Ishana, I think, is talented and I've only seen The Watchers in terms of just solid directing. I would like someone else to write her movies. That's my personal opinion. But the Shyamalans, they don't play that way. She's probably going to end up writing her next movie anyway. It's all good, but I think she's got talent and she'll probably do very well, especially in television. I think she's got more of her strength probably lies there. It really is a neck and neck between Oz Perkins and Brandon Cronenberg for me because Infinity Pool is fucking rad. Longlegs is fucking rad, in my opinion. I really liked it, and they both do something really, really well. They give you a movie that feels very grounded, and they turn it way on its head in a way that you're just like, I'm sorry, that can't really happen. But unlike Men, where I was like, that can't really happen, and I don't like how that ended. Even though I liked the rest of the movie, I hated the ending of that movie. These movies, they flip reality on its head in a way that I bought into. And they painted their characters in a way that I bought into so that when we were done with the movie, I didn't feel like it was a cheat to go crazy and to go weird. They didn't cheat. They earned their weirdness, both of them. And so for now, it's kind of a dead heat. If you forced it on me, I'd pick Oz Perkins because he actually made a movie this year. Brandon Cronenberg did not. But Infinity Pool, I believe, is in the running for the Fangoria Award. So technically, they both are eligible by Fangoria standards. So I will, for this point, like movie to movie, I'll give it to Oz Perkins because I really loved the tapestry of Longlegs.
I mean, and again, there's no wrong answer. I mean, we're talking, and also, kudos. I want to give kudos.
Also, they probably all three fucking hate our guts for having such an insulting category.
Yeah, and I want to say also credit to Oz and Brandon Cronenberg for having brilliant choice in casting because I mentioned last week who's one of my favorite actors working in Hollywood currently, Mia Goth, who's one of my favorite actors working in Hollywood right now, Micah Monroe. You each casted one of them, and so yeah, I'm not going to be mad at you for what you're doing. I really like what both of them do. I think if I'm judging a whole body of work, I'm not just judging this year, and so. I think Possessor for me is a little further ahead of Blackcoat's Daughter, even though I really like Blackcoat's Daughter. And then I think Infinity Pool and Longlegs for me are kind of a dead heat in terms of like I like both of them fairly equally. I really like Infinity Pool and I really did like Longlegs. So yeah, again, I don't think. And by the way, Ashana Night Shyamalan, I'm not insulted. You have one movie. I did like the work she did on Servant. I watched that show and it was a really solid show. But I fucking hated The Watchers, so I can't.
Yeah, I didn't like that
movie. I can't put her in this. Like we're talking about films here and not TV. And yeah, I know the talents. I get it. What you're saying, the talent's there, but the movie was not good. So I can't.
Yeah.
You can't. I can't put you on the same pedestal as the other guy. Emma Roberts really hates us right now, by the way, because have you seen her comments on Nepo Babyism? Boy, she's like railed against that big time. She's like, I've lost jobs because I'm Julia Roberts. I'm like, all right.
Sure. Okay. It doesn't seem like she's suffering, though.
Yeah. I'm just saying. All right. Patrick, our last category is always you were saving your moment here. I've already kind of ruined mine, but I because I wanted to mention that because everyone's like, oh my God, this is the scariest movie in decades. Last category is always, Patrick, is it scary? So when it comes to Longlegs, is it scary?
It is not the scariest movie in decades, but it is scary. What's important to me, Damon, I've been saying it here since day one, is dread. Tell me now that no frame of this movie was without dread. No moment in this movie felt safe. Not one. It wasn't that it was terrifying. It wasn't that I was on the edge of my seat. It wasn't pucker factor of 10. It was just like something's wrong in every frame of the movie. Something bad could happen in every frame of the movie. It never let up. It was Longlegs is like two hands slowly gripping your neck, and they're grabbing tighter and tighter and tighter until you can't breathe anymore. That's what this movie is. And to me, that is scary. And you can't get away from it. You can't get away from the dread in this movie. It is over every inch of the movie. You never feel good. You never feel right. I'm sure the guy that was sitting next to me emptied most of his bowels. He was terrified, but he was scared for different reasons. I was just like, I cannot deny that there's not a frame of this movie that feels unsettling.
And as I said earlier, not to belabor the point, not to just repeat myself, I would say this film is not scary in the sense of people walking out of the theater feeling like they were scared out of their minds. Now, everyone's got a different definition of scary, too, by the way. Some people only like jump scares. Some people don't care about jump scares. They want to be, they need to watch something like Paranormal Activity or Hell House LLC, and which are great movies, by the way. I'm not knocking those movies. Obviously, you know how much I love those movies, but everyone's got a different version of what scares them. I said earlier, I don't think this is the scariest movie in decades, as there are people trying to tease it as. But my last category, you're saying, aren't you going back to what you just said, Damon? No, I'm not. It is scary because it's fucking creepy and it's disturbing, and that's a different layer of scary. When I say it's not scary, I just mean like it's not the kind of film where you're going to be hiding your eyes and you're not going to be able to. There are 100% movies, even I, as fucked up as I am and as desensitized as I am to horror, there are still movies occasionally where I'm like, oh God, what's coming down that corner? There are still movies that get me like that. It is fewer and far between, I'll be the first to admit it, but there are still moments like that for me. That's not really this movie, but it is creepy. It is disturbing. Nicolas Cage is fucking disturbing. So yes, it is scary. It is a scary film. I also just want to, again, talk about expectations. I want to set your expectation to say, you're not going to, I don't think you're, maybe the guy sitting next to Patrick, I don't think most people are going to walk out of this movie going, oh my God, this is the scariest movie I've seen in decades. And that's where I said, set your expectations, because it's a creepy movie. It's a well-made movie. It's a great story, well-directed, well-acted. It's all that. But I don't think I'm going to look at this movie at the end of the year and say, oh my God, this was the fucking scariest movie I saw in 2024. Great movie, good movie, all those things are true. That's where I say, like, scary. I just want to, I want to get away from this hyperbole. We get too much hyperbole in this industry where it's like, oh my God, it's the scariest thing ever. Calm down.
Calm down. It's not the scariest movie you ever seen. That was last week's movie. Don't you remember when you said last week it was the scariest movie you'd ever seen? People they're terrible at that, and it drives me nuts, and I've unfollowed people for pulling that shit. It's like you literally say every movie's the scariest movie you've ever seen, or the most disturbing, or this or that or that. I just say that there is not a frame of this movie that does not have dread in it. And I think you agree. I'm not sure. Like
no, it is.
Yeah,
it is a very dread-inducing. That's why I said creepy and disturbing. It's a very dread-inducing movie. That is absolutely true.
Yeah, and it just is. And I'm like, that's what. And a lot of the exit polls that I was hearing as people, and tons of people were talking as they came out of this movie, just saying, "Boy, that was creepy." Creepy is like the operative word right now, and that creepy, whether they know it or not, is that impossible to escape dread. It really is just. It's from the opening frame all the way through. It is creeping up on you. It is 100% creeping on you. And for that, I do love this movie. I might right now. I know. Late Night with the Devil Is Yours. This right now is, I think, the movie that's at the top of the list for me this year.
Yeah, it's good. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I have to go full Dr. King Schultz here from Django Unchained to go, calm down. Everybody calm down. I love him in that movie. I really enjoyed this movie, and even when I said Maxine last week, while again I had a lot more issues with Maxine, I said I liked it more on the second viewing because I didn't go in hyped out of my mind thinking I was about to see the fucking greatest horror film ever, and it wasn't that. I enjoyed this more on the second viewing because knowing how the story was going to unravel, I got to pay attention to the little intricacies. And I noticed more things because I knew where the story was going. I was like, oh, yeah, they did that. And like you talked about when the scene between Carrie Ann Camera and Lee Harker in the mental institution, I picked up on little things. The first time around, it was just I would do anything for him. The next time around, it was, haven't I seen you before? Haven't you been at my farm? I picked up on all the little things that I didn't see before. So, yeah, I think this is a film that's going to get better with multiple viewings, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think the layers will continue to reveal themselves.
Yeah, so that is Longlegs, obviously in theaters right now. We got so many films coming up new. I saw trailers for like 9 films coming out later this year. They're all horror films. Of course, Heretic, I saw that trailer. That's in October. Of course, Alien Romulus, that's going to be Patrick's full-on head-exploding moment of 2024. A movie called Afraid, which... I don't know how I feel about that one yet.
I don't know if I'm rushing out to see that one. We'll see. We'll see what the schedule's like when Afraid comes around.
That's coming out. Of course, we got Trap in a couple weeks, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie. I was disappointed to find out that's PG-13. I was like, come on. You make an R-rated movie. It's about a serial killer. How are you going to make a PG-13? But not going to prejudge. Just saying.
Yeah. He does a lot with PG-13.
And I love Josh Hartnett. I'm a big fan of Josh Hartnett, so I'm curious to see what they're going to do there. So we got that coming up. So we got a lot of new films coming out in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. As always, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in each and every week. Make sure you check us out on all of your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and, of course, over on our YouTube page. Please subscribe. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us there. And you can also find us on our own website now, rewindofTheLivingDead.com. You'll find news stories, reviews that we don't do on the show, as well as articles and other things and news, everything over there. So go check out rewindofTheLivingDead.com. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up anytime on social media. Just find us, Rewind of the Living Dead, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram especially. I feel like we get the most messages over there, but do not ever hesitate to reach out to us on the other social media platforms as well. And you can also send us an email at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes into the show each and every week. We will see you next week for another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in, my little angels.
Bye-bye.